Good morning. Today is Tuesday, February the 22nd, 2022. If that means anything to anybody, I don't know if people play the numbers. I don't. So, but anyway, that's a 22, 22, 22.
It's my daughter's birthday. She's 28.
And she does not want you to tell her age. Thank you very much. If too much information, parents share too much information, okay?
And we get the privilege too.
Well, I had a parent like that, so I'm going to take up for all children. Please keep your information to yourself. Okay, and this meeting is now being reconvened because we did recess, and the meeting was started Tuesday, last Tuesday, February 17th. We do not have to call the roll, and we don't have any minutes. And the first thing we want to take up is Board Bill 180, which was introduced by Alderwoman Marlene Davis. And I had said I was going to handle it, and I wish I would have asked Alderman Boyd to handle it last week, but we didn't get it done. So, Madam Clerk, would you please read the introduction for Board Bill 180?
Board Bill 180, introduced by Alderwoman Marlene Davis, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Services to conditionally vacate above surface and subsurface rights for vehicle, equestrian, and pedestrian travel in the remaining 702.06 feet of the 20-foot wide east-west alley in City Block 3928, beginning 280 feet east of Vandeventer and continuing eastward to its terminus, same being bounded by West Pine, Spring, Laclede, and Vandeventer in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, as hereinafter described in accordance with the Charter Authority and in conformity with Section 1.4 of Article 21 of the Charter and imposing certain conditions on such vacation.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chairman, are you available so I can handle this bill?
Absolutely. Oh, I am. I'm sorry, I'm Vice President. My bad.
And you have told me that so many times. So now you are going to get a warning. Okay, I have learned the difference between Vice Chair and Vice President. And okay. Alderman Bosley is my Vice Chair. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chairman, would you take over so I can present this bill?
Yes, ma'am. All right, thank you. This is Board Bill
180 is Alderwoman Marlene Davis's. We will do this before we get to the resolution.
All right. Well, you're recognized on Board Bill 180.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Board Bill 180.
You just went a little far away from the phone, or is it just me?
You can't hear me?
You're pretty low.
Hold on just a minute.
Does anybody else concur with that? I mean, you can be heard, but you went kind of faint.
Okay.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me turn up the microphone, see if this is that any better?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. I usually speak loud enough that I keep my microphone turned down. Okay, so Board Bill 180 is, as introduced by Alderwoman Marlene Davis, is to vacate a public alley for St. Louis University. The bill speaks for itself. It actually has a map at the end of the board bill. And it's going to do an alley, which we already read, West Pine, Spring, and Vandeventer, and St. Louis University is surrounds all this area. And she is asking that we pass this out with a do pass recommendation.
All right. Does any of the committee members have any questions? We could go through roll, but this is just a regular bill for vacation, it seems. So if anybody does have any questions, you can just jump right in. Any one of the members. All right. With that being said, we'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 180 out with a do pass recommendation.
So move.
Second.
All right. We've got a motion and we've got a second there on the floor. Madam,
we can't do previous roll because we didn't do minutes, so we have to have the right.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Clerk, please call roll.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Peel.
Aye.
Chairwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. 7 aye votes.
All right, thank you. With that, you have sustained a motion and passed Board Bill 180 out with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you, members of the committee and Mr. Vice Chairman.
you.
All right, Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, will you give me a list of who's on the legislative committee so I can make sure we know who is here? I know the Streets Committee.
Legislation, give me just a second.
Yes, because we're having a joint meeting.
Alderman Boyd,
Okay,
Alderwoman Davis,
okay,
Alderman Vaccaro,
okay,
Alderman Coder,
okay,
Alderwoman Boyd,
okay,
Alderman Muhammad,
okay,
Alderman Oldenburg,
okay,
Alderwoman Martin, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderman Vollmer is the chair.
okay. All right, this way I'll know. So we have Boyd, Vaccaro, and Boyd are here already, and Martin's not here. Okay, all right, just wanted to know. Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm gonna let you get this started after I have her read this resolution, and I want to present the resolution. A lot of this is going to be asking questions. I have quite a few questions to ask of the Board of Elections. So I'm just letting you know that. Sometime I might want to just pull back over into my role as chair. I'll let you know that. Mostly you'll handle this, but once in a while I might pull back over. Okay. And I'm gonna, okay. Mr. Vice Chairman, I have before us resolution 176. It's kind of long, so I don't really want to read it. Do we have anything that's short to talk about what the resolution is about, Madam Clerk? If not, I can just give a short synopsis.
I can read the last, now therefore let it be resolved, that last paragraph. Let me know if that's enough.
No, I'll just do something. So Board Bill 176 is a resolution regarding how we fill vacancies at the Board of Aldermen. With Alderwoman Heather Navarro resigning several weeks ago, there was a vacancy. One of the things that has happened is this is the first vacancy at the Board of Aldermen since Proposition D got passed. Proposition D is an ordinance. Ordinances do not trump city charters or state law. We actually have part of the city charter that relates to how vacancies at the Board of Aldermen are to be filled. And so what happened is that when I started going over what was happening and people start calling me, asking me, how are we going to replace this person? And I started reading the ordinance and I started to read the charter. And then I talked to the Board of Elections. I was surprised that they were they were trying to do some kind of conglomerate that basically wraps the charter around the ordinance. And the charter does not wrap around the ordinance. And a lot of that ordinance is not legal, as it not only refers to replacing alder people, but also the mayor or the comptroller. And so I think there's a lot of inconsistencies. And they kept saying, oh, no, it's fine. And I actually had a conversation where they said that lawyers, city councilor had agreed with them. And so the city councilor, when I called, said not necessarily. Now the city councilor has not shown up. So she's getting I'm going to subpoena her because she is going to show up. So we are going to get some questions about how this is being done. We, as the Board of Aldermen, have a right to set how our elections, municipal elections are run. We do not have a right to set how state elections are run. And in fact, our charter addresses that sometimes if we're going to replace the mayor or the comptroller, depending on when we replace them, we don't actually go under city municipal elections. We actually go under the state elections. So the whole thing goes into how we have partisan nominations. This is the gist of the whole thing. The city charter is very, very specific in demanding that we have the people nominated with partisans, that both the Democratic Central Committee and the Republican Central Committee are mandated to be able to appoint people. And it don't say Democrat or Republican, it just says the established parties, which are the Democrat and the Republican. And it says that the only way you can run as nonpartisan is that you have to submit a petition. That's the only way you can run as nonpartisan. So then when I heard the Board of Elections still saying, well, yeah, we're still going to have a nonpartisan election, I think that is a mistake. I think it's wrong. And it's interesting to me that the city councilors don't want to appear. And I've asked for a written formal opinion of this. And so that's why we're here now. Because on many occasions I've disagreed with the Board of Election. 3 times I think we went to court. 2 of the 3 I won. My very first election I had to go to court to sue my good friend Jimmy Edwards, who was the lawyer at the Board of Elections then. And that also was a victory. So I think that it's important that we know that our elections are being held properly. And so that's why I did this resolution. So wanted to just say that. Wanted to also say we got to do an oath of affirmation for the witnesses again. And we got to talk about public speakers, which again, I think we only have the 2. So we really don't have to get into the procedures. If we had other people who had signed up, we would. So Mr. Vice Chair, if you could, do you want me to do the oath, or do you want to do the oath for the 2 witnesses, which are the same people we had at your committee meeting?
I can do it.
Okay.
All right, we can do them both at the same time, Ben and Mr.
Sure.
Stoff. Do you both solemnly swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So I got lots of questions. So if other people have questions, they should go before me, because I will be asking lots and lots of questions. So I don't want to take up all the time. I don't know if people have had time to read the resolution. I also put some handouts in the, this morning, I put some handouts in our Google Drive. And one of them is a copy of Proposition D. And the other one is a copy of the city charter that speaks to vacancies. If any of you all didn't see it, I would encourage you to look at it. I also want you to know that I sent a letter, which I sent to you all, to both Ben Borgmeyer, the Democratic Director of Elections, and Gary Stoff, the Republican Board of Elections, Director of the Board of Elections. I also sent a request to appear Mr. Jerry Hunter, the 3 commissioners, Jerry Hunter, Geraldine Kramer, and I forget the other commissioner's name. I'm sorry, what's the 3rd commissioner?
Joseph Barbalia.
Yes, Mr. Barbalia. I see Mr. Hunter sitting here. So did anybody get a chance to look at the charter and or Proposition D? Have you had a chance to look at that at all? Okay. All right, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you see if anybody else has any questions of the 2 people? And since Mr. Hunter is here, I don't think I'll be having many questions for him, but why don't we swear him in also?
All right, Mr. Hunter. Looking for.
Yes, Alderman Bosley.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, if you want to see if other people have questions before I get into my long list of questions that I have.
Yes, ma'am. What we'll do is go through the committee members that are present. I'm not going to go in a particular order because I don't have our sheet in front of me specifically, so I'm just going off my screen when it comes to seniority. So hope I don't offend anyone. So I start off with the first person I see here, Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard. Do you have any questions as of now?
No questions, thank you.
No problem. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions right now.
Okay. Alderman Page.
Not a committee member, but I have no questions.
You're here. And because
Always here.
Yes, sir. And thank you for being present. So this is a joint committee. Once again, we have legislation and the streets committee here. So there are multiple members from multiple committees here. Alderwoman Rice, you have any questions right now?
I'm sorry about that. I can't get the video started. I do have some questions, but I'll wait. I want to. I'm not on the committee either. Thanks for including the rest of us who are here. I'm interested to hear the questions from Alderwoman Tyus.
Okay. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Same here. Thank you for the acknowledgement. Would just defer to waiting to hear from Alderwoman Tyus, and if you don't mind circling back with me at the end, I would appreciate it. Thanks, Chairman.
You're welcome. It looks like and Alderwoman Schweizer's hand is up. If I didn't see you previously, my apologies. But is this for? Yeah. Question? Alderwoman Schweizer.
Thank you so much. I had noticed before we started the meeting that it looked like Mr. Borgmeyer had a presentation to give, and I was hoping that presentation would go over the process of how this decision was made and how and I'm assuming that's exactly what it is, that it tells us how they made the decision. So I'd love to see that before I ask any questions of how they made the decision.
Okay, got you. Mr. Borgmeyer, have a presentation?
Yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to I'll let him do that, but I please want to go through, and let me say this, you're gonna get in trouble with the streets committee members because Alderman Boyd is here, Alderwoman Boyd, so don't forget our members.
Going through the list, it popped up on my screen. That's why I tried to make the disclaimer before.
Okay, Alderman Vaccaro is here.
You're right. So my sincerest apologies to the members of the committee. Literally, I'm just going off what my screen says.
I
So
understand.
Swiping right.
All right.
I'm
I
looking
just
at it
think
now.
that I saw some ageism here, so I'm going to take up for the people at my end of the spectrum.
Swiping right. I'll highlight Zoom about this. All right. And just for a disclaimer, I just wanted to, if folks didn't know if there was a presentation, of course, I want you're going to present that and make sure, the time is right for you. Just if folks didn't know there was a presentation specifically, want to present, put that out there. Alderman Boyd, Mr. President. Was it Vice President?
Vice.
Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions or comments right now, sir?
I do not.
All right. Alderman Vaccaro.
No, I'm on both committees, but I'm going to wait for the Alderwoman Tyus to, I think she's a pretty smart person, so I want to wait to see what she has to say.
I agree with that. Thank you. Alderwoman Vaccaro, oh my God, you know what? I'm going, Alderman Vaccaro, my apologies.
That was, no, I didn't, that was it. I was just deferring.
Would you right there? I'm tripping. I don't know. I just read Ballmer's name and he's not even looking at, okay. Alderman, I think we got everybody on the committee.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Alderwoman Boyd, that's just switched up. I'm sorry about that. Alderwoman Boyd.
That's interesting, isn't it, Alderwoman Tyus?
There's a little ageism going on here.
Off the screen.
Right.
His eyes only see young people, okay?
Right. I'm still reading the charter. I did read the Proposition D. And so I did read that, and I too was like Alderwoman Tyus. I had a lot of concerns about that and how it was written. But the charter is eye-opener to me because it seems like we're in conflict with a lot of things from the Proposition D. So I don't have anything right now. I'm continuously to read.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, I believe I hit everybody except for Alderman Dan Gunther. You had any questions or comments?
Thank you. I just gonna listen as well. I do believe Alderwoman Peel is on this as well.
Yes, I am.
And a member.
I'm sorry, I
Just
didn't even
listening now.
apologies. And Alderwoman Peel.
I have no questions at this
All right.
time.
My apologies. I'm gonna write this down so I can get this right the next time I ask for everybody. And I don't miss anybody. Just want y'all to know I love you. All right. Well, it seems that nobody has any questions. I don't at this particular time either, Chairwoman. I do want a presentation and hear what you also have to hear your questions also.
Okay, I'll start with Mr. Stoff since he and I have served the longest together. Mr. Stoff, please state your name for the record.
Leo G. Gary Stoff Jr.
Okay, wow, that junior, okay.
Well,
And what is your, what is the address of the Board of Elections?
we're at 300 North Tucker Boulevard, 63101.
And you are employed by the Board of Elections?
I am, yes, ma'am.
And what is your position or title there?
I'm the Republican director.
Okay, and how long have you been there?
20 years.
Okay, just wanted, and does the Board of Elections have a lawyer that they retain to represent them always, or do you hire lawyers by incident or occurrences?
We don't have a lawyer sort of on retainer. We do use James Hetledge frequently on legal matters.
And how do you spell Hetledge?
Hetlage.
Okay. And do you ever confer with the city councilor's office about matters?
We do on occasion, we don't always.
And is it your understanding that the city councilors represent you in any way, shape, or form?
Only if we reach out to them for something.
Okay. So if you had a matter before you, instead of going to Mr. Hetledge, would you reach out to the city councilor in an attempt to try to get information before going to Mr. Hetledge?
Yes, we've done that on occasion, yes.
Do you work with any particular city councilor, or do you work with the city councilor?
Well, we go through the city councilor, and depending on who that is now, of course, it's a new city councilor, they would likely delegate whatever the issue is to one of the staff attorneys.
And so my question is this. So how do you contact the city councilors? Do you contact the city councilor? At this point, is Sheena Hamilton. Before that, it had been acting Matt Moak. It's been, you know, I can go through a long list. Since Jim Hartung, that's how long. Okay, so I don't want to go all of that way. But
No, we go through the city councilor.
Okay, and then they assign somebody.
Yes.
And in this occasion, did the city councilor assign anybody to you to work with you that you know of?
We've been working with Michael Garvin.
My question is, did the city councilor assign anybody to you?
Frankly, I don't know what gave rise to it was the Deputy City Attorney Garvin reached out to our attorney, I guess, to see what we were thinking and what he was thinking. So I mean, we did not directly reach out to the city councilor, so I'm guessing the city councilor contacted Michael Garvin and gave the assignment to him.
Okay, you didn't reach out to the city councilor. So as I'm just trying to understand this, your office, the Board of Election didn't reach out to the city councilor in this occasion. Someone from the city councilor's office reached out to you?
Contacted our attorney, yes.
Okay, and do you know if that was Michael Garvin or if that was the city councilor or someone else?
It was Michael Garvin.
Do you know approximately when this occurred?
Late January. I don't have the exact date.
Okay. Okay, and it is your understanding that they came to some kind of agreement of how this election should be held?
So I think what happened was, I think Mr. Garvin contacted Mr. Hetledge. They had a conversation. Mr. Hetledge and Democrat Director Ben Borgmeyer and I had a conversation. Then we had a joint conference call with Michael Garvin and Jim Hetledge to compare notes on how the city charter applies, how the ordinance applies, and how the two of them work together. And we all seem to be of the same mind as to how that would work.
And did you produce a written document regarding this meeting?
No, we did. We did, based on legal advice, put together a press release as to how we planned to conduct the election. I believe copies of that have been sent to all members of both committees.
And so there was never any official written document or opinion about this, how this election should be held.
We certainly had communications with our attorney, but that was in the context of a lawyer-client relationship.
I asked, was there any written opinion about how this election should be held?
No.
That you know of?
No.
The answer is no?
No.
Okay, and so you said that it is your opinion that the city councilor represents you? The Board of Election, not you personally, the Board of Election.
No. Well, if the Board of Elections contacts the city councilor about a legal matter and they agree to take that on, then they would represent us. I don't know that they're representing us in this instance.
Okay, let's see. I want to bring before you the city councilor, what their position, what their jobs. Let's see here. Here it is right here. Have you ever been advised in your 20 years with the city that the city councilor actually represents you, the Board of Elections?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if the city councilor, if we reach out to the city councilor and they agree to do that, that's fine. There have been times when the city maybe had a different position than the election board, and so declined to represent the election board.
And do you believe the Board of Elections is a department of the city of St. Louis?
So we're actually a creation of state statute, and our budget, of course, comes from the city, and we communicate frequently and try to make sure that our policies are consistent with those of the city. We don't want to be at odds with the city.
But it is, my question again, is it your understanding that the Board of Elections is a department of the city of St. Louis?
Yes.
And so I would differ. We pay a lot of people's salaries. We do the sheriff, they're not a department of us. And I think that you are uniquely something different. And I think that sometimes people think because we pay salaries, but that is the juxtaposition that we have when, because we are a county within a city within a county, But a lot of what guides you is state law. The only thing we have control over, and I'm going to ask you say this as a question. Pretty much, we have control over municipal elections, but we do not. You also conduct state elections, isn't that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And we don't have any say so about that, isn't that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so I want to read you the powers and duties of the city councilor, because I will tell you, they do not represent you. Okay, and so I'm concerned that our lawyers were calling over there and reached out to you, and that they've been doing this because this is what it says that the city councilor is responsible for. The city councilor shall be the head of the law department, appoint all associates, assistants, and employees in his department, shall through said department direct the management of all the litigation in which the city is a party, including services in the city court, represent the city in all legal matters and proceedings in which the city is a party or interested, or in which any of its officers or officially interested, advise the Board of Aldermen. See, people always think that the city councilor works for the mayor. They do not. The Board of Aldermen helped create this document. They work for the Board of Aldermen before everybody. People don't know that, okay? The Board of Aldermen or any committee or member thereof, and the mayor and the heads of all departments, and through the mayor and heads of departments, all other offices of the city as to legal questions affecting the city's interests, and approves as to form all contracts, deeds, bonds, and other documents to be signed in the name or made to or with the city. He shall render the police department all legal advice and services required by it. He shall receive a salary of whatever, which is, and that whole thing with the police department was before the police department came back under and became, because they were under the state, but they still wanted them to have legal, but they in no place mentioned the Board of Elections as getting legal services from the city councilor's office, okay? So I'm going to be calling over to the city councilors and asking them why they are doing that. And then when I was a young new alder person, people who are in my position, have been here for a long time, told me that years ago. So that is why I was asking you if you believe who the city councilor represented you, because I don't believe you to be a department of the city. We actually have a listing of departments of the city, and you're not listed any place under that. So I'm going to talk to the city councilor about that. You all should be getting your own legal advice and not using our lawyer. It's kind of like me and you getting a divorce, and then me and you trying to use the same, and we have an adversarial role, and we can't use the same lawyers. And I have real concerns about Michael Garvin going over there and reaching out unless the city councilor told him to, and then I have concerns about why she would have told him to do that. So when you all decided to how you were going to have this election, was there a board meeting of the commissioners to decide about this election?
There was not. We circulated to the members of the board how we plan to conduct the election.
Okay, and in doing the election, you were fully aware of both Proposition D, in deciding how the election should be held, you were fully aware of Proposition D, which is an ordinance, right?
Correct.
And then we are aware of the city charter, which is the controlling document of the city of St. Louis. Is that how you understand it?
Correct, yes.
And in your understanding, is it your understanding that our ordinance can override the charter in any way, shape, or form?
No, it cannot.
So it doesn't make any difference if the Board of Aldermen passes an ordinance or if citizens pass an ordinance. If it is in violation or opposition or anything with the charter, then the charter trumps. Is that your understanding?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And I sent you all, I sent the board of, both you and Mr. Borgmeyer, a letter on or about January 28th, 22 regarding my concerns about the vacancy of the Ward 28. Is that correct? Did you receive it?
That is correct, yes.
And so just before I get into my questions, I would like to know if you could just give me an overview of how you all came to a decision that although the city charter is very specific about how we have to replace alder people when there's a vacancy, how you all came to a decision that we're going to let the established parties appoint people, but how we're going to have a nonpartisan election.
Sure. So the ordinance, I'm sorry, the charter, Article 4, Section 5, covers vacancies that occur on the Board of Aldermen. And that provides that if the vacancy occurs more than 180 days before the next general municipal election, then a special election shall be held between 75 and 90 days after the date of the occurrence. There's not a primary, it's a single election. The charter specifically says there's no primary. It provides that the established parties can—
Does it provide or does it mandate?
Say that again.
Does it provide or does it mandate? Shall is a mandate word.
Right. It says there shall be no primary. And it indicates, it says that the established parties can certify their candidates and that someone who chooses to run as a nonpartisan can gather signatures on a petition and also get the name on the ballot that way. The charter really does not address whether candidates designated by the party are to appear on the ballot with a party designation. So having gotten that far with respect to the charter, we then looked to the ordinance, and the ordinance provides for nonpartisan elections with respect to municipal offices, including those for aldermen. And so based on that, we concluded that while the parties can designate their candidate, which means they do not have to go out and gather signatures on a petition, that does not indicate that they would appear on the ballot as Democrat, Republican, whatever. Parties can still support their chosen candidate. But on the ballot itself, all the candidates will be listed as nonpartisan.
Okay. Are you an attorney, Mr. Stoff?
I am.
Okay. Can you tell me the difference between the word can and shall in legal terms?
Shall is a mandate, can is permissive.
Okay, so when the charter reads, in the case of the Board of Election, they shall accept and process the names of candidates. That's a mandate, isn't that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so all the times when you use the word can, they actually said the word shall in here. I don't know if you know that.
That's fine.
Did you know that?
Yes.
So pretty much it mandates the steps, which I put in your letter of what had to happen under the charter, right?
You did, to which we responded.
Okay, so when we look at the charter, which is Article 4, Section 5, it says it shall be a special election, right?
Correct.
It shall not be a primary, so it's only going to be a general election.
Correct.
It shall be held between 75 to 90 days.
Correct.
The Board of Elections shall accept and process the names of candidates representing the established political parties, which are
Correct.
certified by the respective central committees of the aforesaid parties as their chosen representative candidates to stand for election to fill the vacancies.
Correct.
So that you shall do that. The certification of candidates shall be delivered to the Board of Election Commissioners by the aforesaid several central committees. So the candidate themselves cannot deliver their nomination. It had to be by the different partisan parties. Is that correct?
Correct?
Okay. The board shall receive these not less than 30 days before the special election, right?
Correct?
It says that the person desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file nomination petitions signed in the aggregate for each candidate by 10%. So the only way you can be a nonpartisan candidate in this election, because it says to stand for election, is that you have to sign in, you have to turn in a petition, right?
Well, if you're not party certified, you have the option where you can gather.
I'm going to ask you, according to this, it says the person desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file nomination petitions signed in the aggregate for each candidate by 10%. So if I want to file as a nonpartisan candidate, the only way I can do it according to the charter is that I have to file a nomination petition with 10% of the qualified voters from that ward. Is that what the charter says?
That's correct.
So that's the only way I can be a nonpartisan candidate.
Not when you mesh that with the ordinance.
But I'm not meshing it because
All
we're
right.
gonna get to that. We're talking only about the charter right now because the ordinance didn't exist. Is that correct when this charter was written?
That's correct.
So any intent wouldn't have anything to do with the ordinance, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Any intent about this, about the charter wouldn't have anything to do with the ordinance, would it?
No.
Okay, because this charter was written a long time ago, and you and I have gone through a lot of vacancies been filled this way, correct?
Correct.
And when the vacancies have been filled this way, in which the nominating parties nominate people, which mostly we just have a Democrat, but once in a while we have a Republican, and we've even had a Green Party. If I go way, I think I was here before you. We've even had Green Party. So when we put those ballots out, what did we put by those candidates' name?
Party designation.
And what party would that be?
The party that certified a particular candidate.
And how do we do a party designation?
We indicate on the ballot either Democrat, Republican, Green, or whatever.
Okay, so it would be a D, a R, a G for Green Party.
It might be DEM, REP.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, right, okay.
Yeah.
And then independent wouldn't have anything about it, a nonpartisan.
Correct.
Okay.
It would have independent or nonpartisan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, one of the parts of the charter says, which is Article 4, Section 5, entitled Vacancies. All provisions of the city charter and ordinances and rules in thereunder or part thereof inconsistent with this amendment are hereto repealed. So at this time, ordinance D didn't exist, but any ordinance that had exist would have been repealed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what does inconsistent mean to you?
Incompatible, in conflict with.
Okay, and so is it your and the board's position that in order to have an election, that we now can only have elections to fulfill the board, the members of the board, or the mayor, the comptroller, that they all have to be nonpartisan now, since Proposition D is in effect?
That's correct.
Okay, so then I want to ask you this, because that's what I. So let's go to how to fulfill because this also Proposition D applies to the mayor and the comptroller too, right?
It does, yes.
Okay. And so it would be your position that Proposition D would make the mayors and the comptroller, if they got replaced by election, that their elections would have to be also nonpartisan. Is that your position?
Are you asking if it's the regular scheduled municipal election?
No, you said, I asked you, would all elections to have to replace the mayor, the comptroller, and the board of aldermen, would they be nonpartisan? You said yes.
Municipal elections for.
No, that's not my question. My question to you was, and I was very specific, were all elections to replace the president, the board of aldermen, the mayor, and the comptroller, is it the board's position that they would all have to now be nonpartisan?
Are you talking about a vacancy or a
Yes,
regularly scheduled
to
election?
replace a vacancy.
The only thing we're addressing is an aldermanic vacancy.
But my question to you was this. So the board does not have a position about how the mayor gets replaced or the comptroller?
That question has not been brought to us.
And so, but I'm bringing it to you now. So again, I'm gonna ask you, will wait a minute.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Wait a minute, I know you know better, Mr. Hunter.
Well, yeah.
Wait. If you could ask for permission, but I'm the judge in here, okay? No, you don't get to speak until I recognize you. Please mute yourself until I recognize you, or I will, okay? Thank you. So then is it your understanding there could be times when we might have to have a nonpartisan election?
In general?
Yes.
The municipal elections are nonpartisan.
Okay. Is it your understanding that to replace the members of the board of aldermen and or the mayor and the comptroller, there could be times, and let's separate them, the mayor and the comptroller, because that's very specific. If you read the charter proposes, I know how the mayor and the comptroller have been replaced because I've been here. When the mayor is a vacancy, the president of board of aldermen takes that place, and then you have a special election. With the comptroller is appointed by the mayor, and then you have an election. And the election, depending on when it's held, can be during a municipal election, or it also could be during a state election. So if the mayor's election is held during a state election, would that be a nonpartisan election?
We've not looked at that. We've not considered it. And if the issue arises, we certainly will.
Who controls, do you know what the charter says about who controls in a general election or election that's a state election? What controls there?
Madam Chair, we haven't looked at that. I'm sure.
So let me tell you what it says. It says that whenever we have an election, it's during a state election that the state election controls. You don't know that?
Oh, sure I do.
Okay, so if we're replacing the mayor during a state election, then the state elections would control.
I'd have to look at that. I don't have it in front of me.
Oh,
We've
it
not
says it right
considered
here. You want me to read it to you?
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that's not something we've looked at. We've only been looking at the specifics of replacing an older.
I understand but you
All
can't
right.
control my question. So my question is, if the charter says that the mayor if a special election for the mayor falls during a state election, and clearly not only the charter, but the state laws say that the election for then is controlled by the state, then that would be a partisan election, because that's what the state has, because we don't have any law at the state level at this time that says nonpartisan election.
Whatever the charter and the statute say.
Would you like me to
that's
read
what we
them
would
to
follow.
you?
No.
Okay, so have you had elections before in which there have been state elections during and municipal elections were going on, but it was a state election?
I don't know. I mean, there may have been, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go the same thing with the comptroller. And I just want to read it to you. This is what Article 8, Section 6, entitled Vacancies in Elective Office and States, and Offices, and it states. Any vacancy in any elective office except the Board of Aldermen shall be filled by appointment by the mayor until a successor is elected and qualifies. In this case, it's the comptroller. Such election, if for an unexpired term, shall be at the first general city or state election held 50 days or more after such vacancy. Okay, so it can be either at the general, the municipal, or it could be at the state election. It goes on to say, state law governs the election of municipal office at general state elections. And we have case law, and we also have revised Missouri statute to tell us the same thing. So if state law governs the general election, then that's what governs the general election. So then that could not be a nonpartisan election, unless you would say, oh, we're gonna go over here and say this ordinance overrides state law.
Well, certainly an ordinance does not override state law.
And it doesn't override charter either, does
It does not.
it? Okay. I want to go to Proposition D. Proposition D, Section 1, municipal elections. Notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the election for the office of mayor, comptroller, president of the Board of Aldermen shall be conducted as a nonpartisan top 2 runoff elections. Elections for any municipal offices not provided in the charter or this code as of the date of enactment of this section shall be conducted as described in Section 2. I want to first go to, I want to talk about how we in Missouri interpret law. What is your understanding of when we read the law that we do here in Missouri, the state of Missouri?
I don't understand the question.
So do we do black letter law? Do we do interpretive law? I'm trying to figure out how we get to an understanding what the law means.
We follow the language of the statute.
Or the proposition, ordinance, or charter, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so when Proposition D says, notwithstanding any provisions of law to the contrary, the election for the office of mayor, comptroller, president, board of aldermen shall be conducted as a nonpartisan top 2 runoff election. What does that mean to you?
It means that an election for any of those offices will be conducted as a top 2. There's a primary and you can vote for as many candidates as you want, and the top 2 vote getters then appear on the ballot in the general election.
So both, it would be a top 2 for both the primary and the general election.
Well, no, the top 2 vote getters in the primary election then in effect have a runoff in the general election, winner take all.
So then there would be the top 2 in both, because you could have 10 in the primary.
Correct.
Right, but then so there would be, but you would only take the top 2 and that would run in the primary. I mean,
Well,
I'm
no.
sorry, the primary could have as many as they want to, but we would take the top 2 and take to the general.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then it says municipal offices not provided in this charter or this code as of the date of enactment of this section shall be conducted as described in Section 2. I'm sorry, elections for municipal offices. Okay, and what does that mean to you? And what does that mean? What does the Board of Election interpret that to mean?
We would conduct municipal elections as provided in the ordinance.
So you're saying that municipal elections for municipal offices not provided in the charter. So you're saying that the charter does not provide for the elections of municipal office.
That's not true with respect to an aldermanic vacancy.
But it says elections for any municipal office not provided in the charter. So, okay, so you're saying that the charter does provide for the replacement of vacancies for the Board of Aldermen. Is that correct?
That's correct. Article 4,
So-
Section 5.
That is correct. So then we do not go. We will not use Section 2 because that is already provided for in the charter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the next thing, so the conduct of a municipal elections is not, we're not going to follow Proposition D. So we now go to Section 3, ballot instructions for municipal elections. Notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary for the primary election for the office of mayor, comptroller, president of board of aldermen and aldermen, the instruction on the ballot should state, vote for as many names as you approve of. Is that what it says?
I don't have it in front of me, but if you're reading it correctly, that's what it says.
Okay. And so we're not having a primary election, so that doesn't apply to the vacancy for the board of aldermen either. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Section 4, vacancies. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law to the contrary, the election to fill a vacancy in the office of mayor, comptroller, president of the board of aldermen or alderman shall be conducted as a non-party top 2 runoff election. So you're saying that this is what the board of election is standing on it. By this saying that that this says it has to be a nonpartisan top 2 runoff election.
Well, it has to be nonpartisan, but since the charter specifies no primary, it can't be a top tier, can't be a runoff election.
But this vacancy doesn't say anything about primaries, and we're looking at black letter law. It says, notwithstanding any other provision of laws to the contrary, the election to fill the office of mayor, comptroller, president of the board of aldermen or alderman shall be conducted as a nonpartisan top 2 runoff election. And I'm reading it exactly.
I understand that. I'm looking at that, but the charter specifies that to fill a vacancy, there is no primary, there's a single election. And so we're going to have a single election between 75 and 90 days from the date of the vacancy, which would take it to April 19. And it'll be conducted as a non-partisan election.
So the only part that you take it out of this vacancy is nonpartisan because the rest of it does not apply. But you're going to say this part does, but the rest of it doesn't apply to replacing the board of aldermen. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying under Article 4, Section 5, the election.
I'm not talking about, I'm talking about Proposition D right now. Proposition D as specifically says the election to fill a vacancy in the office of mayor, comptroller, on and on, notwithstanding any provisions of law to the contrary. So you're saying that the charter controls as to everything except for the nonpartisan.
Well, we're following the charter with respect to what it requires, and then we're following the ordinance with respect to those matters that are not in conflict with the charter.
Okay, so the only part I see that's not in conflict in this sentence is nonpartisan.
Correct.
That's what I asked all along. Okay. Then Section 5's effect on election ordinances. Notwithstanding any other provisions to the contrary, the elections described in Section 1 shall be nonpartisan. Candidates for office elected by the methods described in Section 2 shall be required to declare candidacy with the Board of Election. However, they shall not declare a party affiliation to the Board of Election. Okay, so we're already saying that Section 2 does not and 3 don't apply to replacement of the Board of Aldermen.
Correct. We're following the charter on that.
Okay, and then the elections, it didn't say 1. The elections described in Section 1 shall be nonpartisan. That's what Section 5 says. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Then it goes on to, it says in section 5, to the extent there is no conflict generally applicable, election ordinance shall apply to the elections described in section 1. However, no political party shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. So no political party shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office.
That's what the section of the ordinance says, but the charter specifically provides that the established parties can certify their candidates.
And when a established party certifies a candidate, does that become a partisan office? It hasn't been in all the history of what we've been doing, because it has been all the time I've been here.
It has prior to the passage of ordinance 7142.
No. The ordinance of the Proposition D only talks about the election. This talks about the office here. So they're two different things. So when a party nominates a person, and in fact, the charter and Proposition D goes along because they say no political party committee shall be formally allowed to nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. So the charter says the same thing and says that the political parties can nominate the partisan office, and the only way you could run as nonpartisan is you have to do a petition.
So what the charter says is that the established parties can certify to the election board their candidates to run in the election to fill the vacancy. Proposition D, ordinance 71410, says that that'll be conducted as a non-partisan.
That is not what I'm asking
election.
you. I'm not talking about, so you want to keep running it and we'll be here all along if we just do it the way I say. We're talking about established political, we're talking about offices. You want to talk about election, but I'm talking about offices now. Because we're going to get to the election, because what you're doing, what I keep hearing you doing is you're trying to wrap the charter around the ordinance. And what this particular ordinance says is no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. So now we're following Proposition D. So according to Proposition D, if you want to be a nonpartisan candidate, or if you want to be in a nonpartisan office, that the political party cannot nominate you. That's what Proposition D says.
That's true, because when you have
I just want to go on.
election,
No. I didn't ask you to do. You're going to just answer my questions, okay? Because I'm the judge, and that's what I'm going to tell you. Answer my questions as I put them to you. Does Proposition D says that no political committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office?
Okay.
Does it say that?
Yes.
And it says there is no conflict. Okay, so when I look at the charter, it says for vacancies. Let's get it back before me, so I'm gonna read it. Persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file nomination petitions signed in the aggregate. So it goes on and on. So both Proposition D and the charter, to me, seems to agree that the way that you can be a nonpartisan candidate, which is under Proposition D and the charter, is that you got to file a petition. And then you don't go through the established parties. And I'm trying to find out what is the conflict, since they both say the same thing. So can you tell me where the conflict is?
I don't think there is a conflict. If you're certified by the party as the party candidate for a vacancy for an aldermanic seat, you don't have to gather signatures on a petition.
And
The
so then
parties-
if you don't have to gather signatures on a petition, then you're not a nonpartisan candidate.
Under Proposition D, you are.
I beg your pardon?
Under Proposition D, you are.
You are a nonpartisan candidate, even if you don't have to gather signatures.
That's correct.
That is incorrect. I just filed as a nonpartisan candidate, which I didn't want to do. And I had to get signatures. In fact, Proposition D requires you to get signatures. Did you know that?
Of course.
So what you just said was incorrect.
No, under the charter, the parties, those candidates don't have to gather
No.
signatures.
What I
but
said,
they
what you
still
said
run
is
as non-
under Proposition D. So let's go through this again, because I'm not trying to confuse you. I want it to be non-confused. Proposition D required me as a candidate almost a year ago to have to go out for the first time ever, because I've been a Democrat all my life and I'm still a Democrat. It required me to go get petitions. And every member of this board that had to run, and I'm looking at Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Evans, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Peel, Alderman Gunther, Alderman Vaccaro didn't have any opposition. We all had to go get a petition and fill
That's
it out.
correct. Yep.
We had to say that we were nonpartisan candidates, and we could not be nominated by our respective parties, or we couldn't even put a D or a R or anything behind our name. You had to run as nonpartisan.
That's correct.
Okay. But we weren't doing vacancies. Okay. But to do a vacancy under Proposition D, if you're nonpartisan, you still have to do a petition.
Except when it conflicts with the charter.
It doesn't conflict with the charter. It said, the Proposition D says, if I want to run today as a nonpartisan in the Ward 28, I have to do a petition. Because if the Democrats and Republicans don't nominate me, I can still run as a nonpartisan, but I have to do a petition. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So then the charter says, by the way, because it goes along with Proposition D, if you want to be a nonpartisan candidate, persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file a nomination petition signed by 10%. So Proposition D and the charter agree that the way you become a nonpartisan candidate is you file a petition.
That's correct.
Okay.
Except when the parties designate their candidate and they don't have to gather
No, it does
signatures.
not. It doesn't say any place in here except. That's what you are assuming and you're implying, but there's no place, read me, any place in the charter that it says that, or Proposition D. It does not. They actually agree on that point. So where does it say that?
So if you're running as
No.
a
I want you to get the charter out before me and read to
no.
me where it says that.
The parties have the right to certify their candidate, which means that candidate doesn't have to gather signatures. Under the charter, if you don't have the party certification, if you'd like to run as a nonpartisan independent, you can do that. But in terms of how the names appear on the ballot, the charter.
So
doesn't
you're
address
just
that.
ignoring me, so I'm going to call you out of order. Read to me where the charter says that you can run as any other place where it says that, oh, but by the way, even though both you and Proposition D agree that the only way you can stand for nonpartisan candidate is to file a petition, but the Board of Election is going to circle around and say, but somehow this still means that the people who are certified by partisan parties are nonpartisan. Where does it say that?
So the charter says that the parties can designate their candidates, but the charter doesn't address whether the designated candidate should appear on the ballot with a party designation.
And so my question to you is, again, in 20 years, have you ever seen where the party designated a candidate and it was not? Because, so if we have a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent running for the 28th ward, if nobody has a D or R how do we know what they're running as?
You don't. Presumably
So,
through their own.
Presuming that when
advertising.
the people said, you're presuming that the people wrote the charter, because that's what you're doing. And you're also going to get rid of 30, 50 years of how we've done things. You're saying that all these years, that what we mean is that what the charter meant was that you don't have to be able to know if it's a Democrat or Republican.
Prior to
No.
Proposition D,
I'm saying, no. This, the charter was written prior to this.
I
Did
understand
the
that.
charter mean when it was written that you had to be able to know who it was?
Well, it really doesn't say that, but that was the implication.
It doesn't say that?
No.
But what have you guys been doing?
So when people get a party designation prior to Prop D, their name would appear on the ballot as either a Democrat, Republican,
No, you
Independent,
keep
Green.
throwing Prop D in that. My question to you is, what have you been doing for the last 20 years that you've been there?
Up until Prop D, we were doing.
And I
exactly
don't
what
want
you
to ask,
described.
you cannot answer my questions the way I don't ask them. What have you been doing up until now? Not up to Prop D. What have you, the Board of Election, been doing in the last 20 years when you were there when a candidate was nominated by a party?
Up until this particular situation, we included a party designation on the ballot.
Okay, so the party designation would be Republican or Democrat.
Or green or whatever, yeah.
Okay, and so you say it doesn't say it in here, but that's what you all have been saying, that that's been your process for the 20 years you've been there.
That's correct.
And it's been the process before you came there too. In fact, I would dare say you cannot find any ballot that somebody did a replacement for a vacancy that didn't have a D or R on it.
I expect that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your interpretation, and by your, I mean the Board of Elections, all these years have been that this part of the charter, which speaks to replacing an alderman, meant that it should be, if the parties nominate, that meant that it was a partisan nomination. We are not getting to election, that it was a partisan nomination. Is that correct?
The parties designated their candidate, yes.
So it was a partisan nomination.
Well, it doesn't say that in the charter. It says they can.
I didn't say what it said in the charter. I said it has been the Board of Elections interpretation for all these years that following this very charter that we're talking about now, that when the parties nominated someone, that it was a partisan nomination and you put a D or R or G behind it.
If someone is certified by the party, that's correct.
Okay, so, and this has been going on 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But now you're saying that the ordinance comes along, Proposition D, and changes all of that.
It does with respect to whether party designations appear on the ballot.
No, it doesn't, because it did not say parties that, because show me where in Proposition D it says party designations cannot appear on the ballot.
It says they're nonpartisan elections.
But that still doesn't say party designations cannot appear on the ballot.
Well, that's the way we interpret it, and that's how.
But does it say it any place?
That's how the
say it?
municipal election was run in 2021. That's why you had to gather
Does it
signatures
say?
and your names appeared on the ballot as nonpartisan.
But we're not operating under that. We're operating under a specific charter. Does Proposition D say any place at all? Because when we did the election in 2021, we didn't operate under the charter and the vacancies, okay? We operated under a blank slate. But here, there's something that's not blank. Is there any place in Proposition D where you can show me that it says that when candidates are certified by partisan parties, that you cannot put a D or R by it?
Proposition D doesn't read that
It's
way.
a yes or no answer.
Under Proposition D, candidates run as nonpartisan.
It's
a
a yes or
nonpartisan
no
election.
answer. We'll be here as long as, and because does it say any place here that you cannot put a D or R by it?
It does not.
Thank you very much. You will not win any of these arguments with me because I love cross-exam. And so we will go over it over. So it's just much easier to answer my questions. Will be specific. So no place in Proposition D. So can you tell me what is the Board of Elections definition of a nonpartisan election?
Where there's no party affiliation.
Where do you get that definition from? Black's Legal Dictionary?
No, that was just my interpretation.
So no party affiliation. Is there a party affiliation when when a party nominates a candidate?
Or anything?
To replace a member of the Board of Aldermen? Is there a party affiliation for that?
Not on the ballot.
I did not ask you that question. You still want to run out. Lawyers make really terrible witnesses because they have to waste a lot of time. Is there a party affiliation when the party nominates a candidate?
The certification comes from the party, so they designate their candidate.
So is there a party affiliation?
Yes.
So there's a party affiliation when the established party nominates, certifies, so when they nominate, that's it. When they certify it, that's a party affiliation. Is that right?
Correct.
When they bring in, when they deliver to the Board of Election, that's a party of affiliation, right?
Correct.
And a non-party affiliation through this process under 7 says person standing to desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate. That would be where you would file a nomination petition.
Correct.
And here, nobody would know who you are affiliated with, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do you think, so let's go back again. So you're telling me in these 20 years you've been here and 30 years since I've been involved with politics, the Board of Elections has always determined that the meaning of City Charter Article 4, Section 5 was that when the parties nominated, certified, and delivered the certification, that there was a party affiliation, because there is. There's no way you can go around it. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that do you believe it was the intent of this charter that then you have an election where you would take that party affiliation off?
I would not think so.
In fact, we know that not only do we not have to think so, we know that not to be the case because we have all these 20 or 30 years of how we've done it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So then we come along with Proposition D, which we have to assume things. So when we get to Proposition D, all of a sudden we get into this assumption. And that is that it somehow trumps 20 and 30 years of actual policy that has been carried on, and that it overrides all the specific language that specifically means that they have party affiliations. And the only way that we get to this is to do a nonsensical interpretation of, well, yes, all this stuff is party affiliation, but somehow we don't have party affiliation when we have an election, even though both the charter and Proposition D says that the only way you could run as a nonpartisan is you have to file a petition. So we go all around the circle of both of the prop and the charter to say this is a nonpartisan election. And even you can't with a straight face say that is the intent of this charter. So I would say, I would look to the charter Article 4, Section 5, which says anything that's inconsistent with this with the amendment, which this was an amendment, are repealed. And so there is no way that Proposition D is not inconsistent with the charter. Everything that it says is inconsistent with how to fill a vacancy of a member of the Board of Aldermen. And it gets even more consistent when you get into the mayor, which you guys are not going to talk about, but I did get into it. Proposition D cannot override if the mayor is replaced or the comptroller is replaced during a general election that's controlled by the state. So I think it's ridiculous that you all have come up with this. I've asked the city councilor to write a legal opinion of how they get to this, because there's some more things in here that I've not told you all, because I'm just looking at how you're curling yourself and jumping through these hoops to try to say that we don't deal with the charter, that we somehow deal with Proposition D and we make the charter fit around Proposition D. I had one other question here. I'm going to find it. So Proposition D, Section 5 states that no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. So they agree with, here again, agreeing with the charter. They say you cannot nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. That's what Proposition D says. You want to read it?
No, I see it.
So both the charter and Proposition D agrees. But yet you, the Board of Elections, says, well, it doesn't really mean that. How can it not mean it? It's very specific. You don't have to interpret it.
Well, the charter really doesn't address how candidates are to appear on the ballot, whereas Proposition D does.
But Proposition D says no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. It specifically says that.
Correct, and the ordinance can't trump the ordinance, and the ordinance says, can't trump the charter, and the charter says that the established parties can certify their candidates.
No, but it didn't say for a nonpartisan office. I would tell you that the charter says that you can do it for a partisan office. It's specifically, you and I have just gone through all of that. So the charter says you can nominate for a partisan office and you cannot nominate for a nonpartisan office. Proposition D says the very same thing.
That's why it's a nonpartisan election.
No, because you would be nominating a candidate that's partisan for a nonpartisan office in violation of Proposition D.
We think we're following both the charter and the proposition.
So you're saying that Proposition D, as it relates to formally nominating a candidate for a nonpartisan office, is not correct and does not apply to the situation.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
You're saying that Proposition D, Section 5, which states, no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. That's what it says, right?
Agree.
And City Charter says persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate should file a nomination petition, and goes on to say all the other one. And it doesn't say it specifically, but it only leaves that interpretation that the other people who run, which we already have said, would be by partisan parties, would be the partisan candidates. The persons desiring to stand as a nonpartisan candidate has to file a petition. Are the people who are nominated by the Democrats, are they going to file a petition?
No.
So then they cannot stand as a nonpartisan candidate.
We think they will.
Persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate, is that somehow confusing?
No.
So the charter says persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate should file a nomination petition. Is that confusing?
No.
So back up here, because this is the charter. Back up here, how the rest of the people. So if you can only file as a nonpartisan candidate if you file a petition, how will I be the Democratic nominee if I didn't file as a nonpartisan candidate? And how will you indicate on the ballot that I'm a nonpartisan candidate when I didn't do what it says is required to do?
Well, the charter gives the established parties the right to designate their candidate. The charter does not specify that those candidates have to appear with a party designation.
It says persons desiring to stand for election. So that prohibits anybody except for the people. So you guys don't want to read this part, but it's going to keep on being read. Persons desiring to stand for an election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file nominations petitions. That's what it says.
I understand.
It does say it's can, may, or the Board of Election can come along and try to read some gobbledygook into it. It says you shall file a nomination petition. So if I'm nominated by a partisan party and I have not filed a nomination petition, I cannot stand as a nonpartisan candidate. Simple as that. That's what the charter says.
I don't think the charter says that, but.
Persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file. What does shall mean? Mandate.
I understand that.
And so if I don't file a petition, then I cannot, it does not say I'm allowed to. It says I have to file a nominating petition.
If you're not
tell me where it
certified,
doesn't say, I beg your pardon?
if you're not certified by one of the established parties.
It does not say that. It does not say if you're not certified. It does not say, show me where it says that.
Well, our interpretation is if a party.
But I'm not asking about your interpretation. I'm asking what the black letter law of the charter says.
The charter provides for two options, either party certification or gathering signatures.
And when you gather, and it says, how can you stand as a nonpartisan candidate? The charter is very specific.
So is there a question in there?
Yes, how can a person who wants to, per the charter, how can you stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate?
You can gather signatures on a petition under the charter.
And that's the only way it provides that you can do it.
Well,
That's the only way it provides that you can do it. Does it say any other place how you can run as a nonpartisan candidate under the charter?
well, the charter doesn't specify how a candidate's name is to appear on the ballot.
I
if
did
it
not,
allows-
I said, how could you stand for election? What is standing for election?
Having your name appear on a ballot.
So standing for election, because we're getting into Bill Clinton territory now, depends on what "the" means. So standing for election means having your name on the ballot. So when Article 4, Section 5, subsection 7 says, persons desiring to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate, that means person desiring to have their name on the ballot as a nonpartisan candidate have to file a nomination petition to be that way. Is that what that means?
The language speaks for itself.
Okay. So my question again, is that what that means?
The language speaks for itself.
Is that what that means? We'll be here all day. Does
Well,
that mean that if I want to be a nonpartisan candidate standing for election, which by your interpretation, having your name on the ballot, if I want to have my name on the ballot as a nonpartisan candidate, that it mandates I file a nomination petition?
If you're running for a vacancy to fill a vacancy on the Board of Aldermen, under Article 4, Section 5, if you don't get party certification, then you can still have your name.
It does not say if, any place in there. It does
Yeah.
not. It says person desiring. It first tells you what to do if you want to be under partisan, because we've already said the nomination is partisan, blah, blah, blah is partisan, all through the things. But it gets to 7 and says, persons desire to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate, because it goes right through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Shall file a nomination petition. And you've told me standing for election means having your name on the ballot. So to have my name on the ballot as a nonpartisan candidate under the charter, Article 4, Section 5, Section 7 says that I have to file a nomination petition. You know what it says?
That's correct.
Okay. So if my name appears on the ballot and I have not filed a nomination petition, then you're the board, lets me appear as a nonpartisan candidate. I'm in violation of Article 4, Section 5, subsection 7. Is that correct?
We don't think so, no.
So tell me where I'm not in violation of Section 7, because you're trying to run my questions, but my question says that according to Article 4, Section 5, subsection 7, that if I want to run as on election for a nonpartisan candidate, I have to file a nomination petition. And if I appear on the ballot under Section 7 with no designation, then I'm in violation of 7.
Article 4, Section 5 creates 2 options.
No, it does not.
Well, we think it does.
It does not. It is a continuation. I'm asking you about 7. You're trying to, under 7, I didn't ask you about any other part. I said, if I appear on the ballot as a nonpartisan canndiate and I have not filed a nomination petition, I'm in violation of subsection 7. It's a yes or no answer. And you cannot add any more to it. I am in violation of subsection 7.
I don't think so.
So tell me where I'm not in violation of it. And we're only talking about subsection 7 now. You still can't run it.
Under Article 4, Section 5, there are 2
That we're
options.
not, but that is not my question. Under
Okay.
Article 7, on Article 4, Section 5, subsection 7, if I appear on that ballot And you're free to show me where I'm mistaken. And I stand for election, which you said having your name on the ballot as a nonpartisan candidate. I'm in violation of subsection 7. We're gonna get to the rest, but right now I'm talking about subsection 7.
So I don't have that in front of me, so read that to me.
Persons desiring to stand for election as nonpartisan candidates shall file nomination petitions signed in the aggregate for each candidate by a 10% of the qualified voters in the respective wards who voted at the next preceding mayoral general election.
Okay. So what's the question?
That if I appear on a ballot, which your words, I asked you, what is standing for elections? You said having your name on the ballot. So if I, Sharon Tyus, desire to have my name on the ballot for election as a, and I appear without a, and I have no indication. So I'm appearing as a nonpartisan candidate, but I have not filed a petition. That is in violation of subsection 7.
I go back to 4 or 5.
You can
If
keep
you
going
appoint-
back and we'll be right here because we're not talking about 4 or 5 and you do not,
Well-
not get to ask my questions.
I
So
don't
would you
think it's a
please
violation.
answer my question, which is only to 7.
And the answer is no.
I'm not in violation of 7.
No.
Okay, then please read to me the part where I can do that in 7.
I've already answered the question. I'm not
No,
sure
you
what
have
else I can
not,
tell you.
because I am speaking to 7 and you keep trying to change my question and you're not. Please answer to me as to where in 7 it says I can do that. Because I told you we're going to get to the rest. It won't make any sense what you're saying. Where in subsection 7 does it say I can stand for anything other than a nonpartisan candidate by filing a petition?
By being certified by the party.
No, read that where it says in section 7, because you're sounding really, so you're not going to win and your face is getting red because you're trying to win, and just answer the question, Mr. Stoff. And there is something about being in contempt of the Board of Aldermen, and I will bring it. Answer my daggum question. My question is there any part of subsection 7 that says that I can stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate without having a petition filed?
Not in section 7.
There you go. Now, all that time you took up, and I don't like to try to use our rules against people, but I will. So it'll be really easy because I can ask very specific questions if you just answer them. So you want to go back over through this all again, which I don't, because we already went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you yourself says there is no place, which let me go back and read your answers. No place in Proposition D does it state that when the party certifies, nominates a candidate, that a D or P or R cannot be next to it. It says, it doesn't say that. You said that was your answer. You said definition of a nonpartisan election, no party affiliation. You then went on to agree that there was a party affiliation when the parties nominate the candidate, when they certify the candidate by the central committees, when they bring the certification to the Board of Election Commission, which they don't let the nominee do it. You have to do it. That those are all party affiliation actions right there. We've already gone through all of that. So all of this leads up to everything it talks about is a party affiliation before. There's no part that does not. Sections 4, 5, 6 all speak to party affiliation. Then 7 speaks to how you can be a non-party affiliation. But you take those 2 sections, one that speaks to a party affiliation and one that speaks to non-party affiliation, and you then say, but it doesn't really mean that, even though we've been doing it like this. And that somehow our ordinance has somehow undermined our entire charter. And I'm telling you, it does not. I have no further questions for you, Mr. Stoff, at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hunter, did he leave? Okay, he left. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, at some point, we're in the middle of lunch. I don't like to have 8-7-hour meetings without lunch or something like that. So I'm going to start to talk with Mr. Borgmeyer, but at some point we need to look and let people go have a lunch.
Okay.
So are you opposed to that at any point?
Oh, no, I'm not. You want to have like a 30-minute recess or an hour-long recess?
An hour long, well, how about 45 minutes? It's about 1:15 right now. And so before we even get to Mr. Borgmeyer, since this is lunchtime, how about we have a 45-minute recess so people can go get something to eat?
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Back at 2 o'clock. Is that all right?
Yes, ma'am. Sounds
All
like a plan.
All right.
All right, family, I guess we will recess this committee until 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody back here at 2.
Mr. Vice President, I'm sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair.
Vice Chair.
We don't want Mr. Alderman Boyd to
Boyd.
jump on me again, okay? We're gonna get started again. And so I wanted to give people, if they have, anybody have any questions for Mr. Stoff? Is he back again? No, he's not here. I see Ben Borgmeyer twice.
Yeah. I apologize. Gary's having some technical difficulties he's trying to resolve right now. So that's his status. Do you want me to try to see what's going on or have him join me?
Well, I
over
wanted
here?
to give the other people a chance,
Okay.
if you can. We'll take
Sure.
a couple of more minutes.
Okay, let me see what's going on. I'll be right back, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll get started. We are streaming right now. So the Vice Chair has asked me to give some context. The reason for this resolution is because the Board of Aldermen, we are in charge of the qualifications to be on the Board of Aldermen. Even when there's an election, then we actually have a meeting. I used to be the chair of rules, in which we go through to make sure that the person who sent actually has all the proper credentials to be a member of the Board of Aldermen. We are the final say. And also, we are in charge of municipal elections in the city of St. Louis. And so when I heard about what was going on as far as replacing the Alderwoman from the 28th who resigned several weeks ago, and then I heard I had conversations with the Board of Election, and they said, yeah, we know about this charter, but we're going to kind of have an election that's going to be nonpartisan under Proposition D. And Proposition D is an ordinance, and it cannot change not only the charter, it cannot change the state law. And so as I start to dig into it, I actually wrote up an opinion, which I'll send you all to the Board of Elections, saying, I think you're doing this the wrong way. In that the charter actually does rule. Much of what you heard Gary Stoff say to me earlier, that's kind of the thing they said to me. Only I hadn't dug into the charter even as much as I have since then, as far as where the charter and Proposition D actually do agree. They still try not to go along with it. And so I think it's been my history with the Board of Election from my very first day that I ever ran for office, that oftentimes they're not correct. And they dig into a position and they don't change it. And so I've had to sue them on a number of occasions. I lost once, but I won twice. And the time that I lost, it was about a recall petition. And then ultimately I defeated the recall, but I didn't like the way the Board of Election was doing the recall petitions, and some things they did have to do differently. So I've been doing this for a lot of years. And I want them to make sure that they give respect to our charter. I don't think, I'm very open in saying that I think Proposition D is horrible. I think it was written poorly. A lot of it is they have to try to interpret. They don't do black letter law. As a lawyer in the state of Missouri, a lot of what we do is what it says. And what you heard Gary saying a lot of times as well, yeah, it says this, but we decided we're going to do this. And that's not how I think you're supposed to do the charter. And I think if you give any deference to the anything at all, it would be to the charter, not to Proposition D. And I've gone through a number of these vacancies in the 30 years I've been first elected, and we've never not put any D or R by someone's name. And then when the charter gets so specific as to say that you cannot run as a nonpartisan without filing a nomination petition, and so does Proposition D. They both say the same thing, but then they say, well, we're going to have a nonpartisan election anyway, and we're not going to put something by a person's name. So if you, Alderman Bosley, ran as a Democrat, I ran as a Republican, and Alderwoman Evans ran as an independent, if you don't put anything by anybody's name, then people will not know. You will not know. You understand what I'm saying?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So that,
right.
So basically, there's a difference in opinion in the way that we should be holding this election.
Correct.
And the Board of Election would like to do it by the Proposition D laws, but the charter trumps that based on how you can replace an alderman when they resign.
And then the other added thing was, I had talked to, I got an email, we emailed back and forth, and Alderman, Mr. Stoff said about his lawyers had said, and I wanted to know who his lawyers was. And then it came up about Michael Garvin being involved. And I want to know why our lawyers are over there at the Board of Election, because Michael Garvin has no business at the Board of Election, as far as I can see, because he doesn't represent them. Okay. And so I often find Michael's hands in things. We've been around a long time of each other. And so I think that's a conflict for him to have been over there and giving them legal advice, and he's not their lawyer. So I'm going to subpoena Michael and let him tell me what they said. And I hope from now on, he won't be over there dipping over into things, because it's enough that the city councilors represent the Board of Aldermen, the mayor, comptroller, and the boards and what do they say, the people who are city entities. So to then just go out there and start dealing with the Board of Elections, I have some problems with that. Okay. And I think we need to be careful of what we do and who we get out there with and give people opinions. And this is one of the times that Mr. Garvin, to me, should not have been over there and given opinions. So he's created what I believe to be a conflict. And then I was told that the city councilor had taken a position. And then when I talked to the city councilor, she said, who told you that? And indicated that maybe she didn't. So maybe they took Michael Garvin's statements as an official position of the city councilor, and he does not speak as an official of the city council. That's what we have a city councilor for. And that's why we can ask for city council's written official opinions, which I have put in writing and asked her. So that's why I'm before it, because I want us to conduct our elections so that the charter and the state laws are followed.
Understood that. I think that was crystal clear. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. The next person that we have here is Ben Borgmeyer, who is the Democratic Director with the Board of Elections. Okay, is it all right if I get started?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Please continue.
Mr. Borgmeyer, could you please say your full name for me, please?
Sure. My name is David Benjamin Borgmeyer.
Raymond Benjamin? Okay.
David, sorry.
Oh,
David Benjamin.
David, okay.
Yes.
And you are employed by the Board of Elections?
That's correct.
And what is your title?
I am the Democratic Director.
And that address is 300 North Tucker?
That's correct.
And how long have you been with the Board of Elections?
Let's see. So it was July of 2020. So I think a little, what is that? 2.5 years at this point, or sorry, year and a half. Apologize.
Okay, you do math like me.
You must not be good.
Okay, and you are a lawyer?
I am, that's correct.
And you heard Mr. Stoff testify that you do not have a lawyer for the board on retainer. Is that right?
That's correct. I heard that.
But he said that sometimes you consult with James Hetlich. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are there other lawyers that you consult with regarding matters for the Board of Elections?
So I'd say yes.
Okay, so he's not on retainer, so it depends on the situation, maybe the lawyer that you would use. Is that it? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I mean, so when you're asking Mr. Stott those questions before, for example, we have used the city councilor for specific things in the past. So if there was an issue, we have.
Interesting.
Yes. Usually there's some kind of agreement, like with the city councilor is beforehand, before they get involved with the case, but yes, we have.
Do you think that the Board of Election is one of the city departments?
So I know that we are a county office within the city. And so that relationship has never been crystal clear to me as far as what that relationship is. For example, we were before the Board of Aldermen this morning on a pay bill because we are not part of civil service.
Correct.
So I think our relationship, yes, so our relationship's not necessarily 100% spelled out. But like you commented this morning, you know, you guys, city pays the bills for us for the most part, unless it's an election where there's shared cost. So I guess it's not a straightforward relationship, but I think there is one.
It's a relationship, but it's just not, you're not a department. It's, we pay also,
Yeah.
we do the raises for the sheriff.
Right, no, I agree.
We do the
There's
raises.
probably a
So-
reason.
Right, so a raise does not make you, just because we're paying your bills, because we pay the bills of the county office does not make you a department, okay? Like we have
I
a
agree.
personnel department and a street department and those things, those are departments, okay?
Right.
All
And
right,
so it's like when there's consultation with the city council's office, it's something that the city council's office willingly takes on. It's nothing that's assumed, I would say.
and does the city councilor's office give you legal written opinions?
I've not received a legal written opinion since I've been here, so I don't know if that's always a practice or not.
And, but they will give you a verbal opinion of what they think is right or wrong?
Yeah, typically, like, you know, I could go into specific examples if you wanted to, but
No, that's fine right there.
no, that's fine, whatever you want. I'm here to answer your questions.
Somebody needs to be muted. I'm hearing somebody, okay. Okay. And is it, you heard Mr. Stoff say that Michael Garvin was the contact you all worked with in the city council's office?
I heard him say that, yes.
Were you at any such meeting, either by Zoom or in person?
I was involved in a phone call with Mr. Garvin.
Okay. And was other members of the Board of Election on that phone call?
It was me, Mr. Stoff, I, and James Hetlich.
Michael Garvin, Stoff, and who was and yourself, and who else?
Jim Hetlich, the attorney.
Okay. And this was about this matter of how to replace member of the Board of Aldermen, is that correct?
That's correct. May I say something?
Sure.
All right, so I viewed that session as more like, almost like a brainstorming session in some senses. It wasn't necessarily like a final opinion, here's what, you know, we're going on. But basically like this whole intermeshing of Prop D and charter, whether or not there should be a meshing or not, I viewed it as more like a brainstorming session. So not like a final product opinion, you know, just people talking about things. Like I've had conversations with many older people over the last, it feels like the last year of my life, but I think it's only been 3 weeks that we've been talking about this vacancy.
And that I don't have a problem with. I had a problem with, and you saw the emails when it started to say, and this is what, when you dig in about what the city council says, then I'm gonna dig in, okay? You're having brainstorms, that's good. I think that is always good. you and I have brain sessions where we talk back and forth.
Correct.
So I don't have that problem at all. I call both of you, both Mr. Stoff and yourself, and do the same thing. So I don't have a problem with that. Long as, but when you bring my city councilors department in it, then I'm gonna have a problem, okay? When you start to think that they represent you. And so also you heard him say that you all released a press release about how the election was, how you plan to run the election.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And it is your understanding that ordinances cannot, do not trump the charter and or city or state statutes?
That's correct. That is my understanding.
And I'm not asking for this, but did you ever get a written opinion from your lawyer regarding this matter?
No. No formal opinion. There were some, there was conversation. Yes.
And so I don't want to get into all this stuff first. You brought some kind of presentation with you. Is that correct?
I just prepared a PowerPoint that basically just talks about kind of to me, it's the chronology of the thought process that we went through. I do have that.
Okay. Is there any member or non-member who would object to Mr. Borgmeyer presenting his PowerPoint at this point? Mr. Vice Chair, do you mind if he presents his PowerPoint at this point?
Please go ahead, Mr. Borgmeyer.
Okay, so you go ahead and do that, and then I'll ask questions of it.
Sure, let me get it up here.
And we might have to do something for screen sharing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the problem I have is like, I'm doing this on my iPad. I have a document that there might be parts of it that are cut off, but I'll try to explain if parts are cut off.
Okay, excuse me, STL TV, who has to allow him? Okay, very good.
Is that it? Okay.
I see it. Does everybody, hold on, does everybody see it?
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, and I've never done this before, even though this whole year and a half of Zoom, I haven't shared a screen once. So if someone loses me, please stop me and I will try to figure it out. So it's titled Ward 20 Special Election. Okay, and so then basically it's like when we first started to look at it, we what are the potentially applicable provisions? And so then in this, we listed city charter has been.
Can I stop you for 1 minute? Will you be able to share? Will you be able to give us a copy of this PowerPoint or not?
Sure, I can drop it right now into your chat. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you. Now go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so first we said Article 4, Section 5 of the City Charter, which we kind of talked about a lot this morning, and then also Ordinance 71410, which is otherwise known as Prop D. And I just noted that Prop D was passed by St. Louis voters. It was pursuant to Section 5, so the initiative that was November of 2020 when that was passed.
Now, what do you mean by provided by Section 5 of the City Charter?
So, by initiative, so through the initiative petition process. So Section 5 would be, yes. So then this looks like where it's cut off a little bit. So then it talks about Article 4, Section 5 of the City Charter and kind of breaks down what that Article 4, Section 5 provides. And kind of the things that it specifically says is when a vacancy occurs in the office of alderman more than 180 days prior to a general election, such vacancies shall be filled through a special election by voters of the vacating alderperson's ward. The individual selected shall serve for the remainder of the unexpired term. The election shall be held 75 to 90 days. There shall be no primary election preliminary to the vacancy election, and the election board shall accept and process the names representing the names of candidates representing the established political parties as their chosen candidates to stand for election to fill the vacancy. And this is where it's cut off here a little bit. Let me try to open it up just to make sure.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Yes, sure. You can ask anytime.
I've had a request that we share this with the clerk. Would you have a problem if our clerk posted it in our Google Docs or not?
Of course not. I can, is that emailing to Mr. Kennedy right now, or Clerk Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that right now. Hold on while I have it on my mind. All right, and then what is the email address to send that to? Is it just a Kennedy T?
No.
Okay.
Do you have the clerk's Board of Aldermen's email address? I don't want to put that in the chat. Email it to me and I'll just forward it to him because
I have it right here. I have VOA
Okay.
Alderman, VOA clerk.
Don't, please don't put it out there.
No, I'm gonna email it. I'm just gonna use email. I'm not gonna put it on. Yeah.
He tries to get business done on that one.
Okay.
Me being Ward 1, I get 100 emails a day.
Well, you're number one.
Okay.
Okay, I just emailed that to everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. So to get back to the PowerPoint, so where it got cut off there, it just says simply that persons seeking this party certification shall conform to all the requirements of the revised code for primary nominations. Persons desiring to stand for election as nonpartisan candidates shall file nomination petitions signed by 10% of the qualified voters in respective ward who voted at the next preceding mayoral election, and then filing closes 30 days prior to the date scheduled for the vacancy election. So I would say, Alderwoman Tyus, you said that we wrapped the charter around Prop D. We started with the charter and said, what does the charter provide? What are the kind of the hard points in the charter that obviously, because it's a charter, we can't go around. And so those, when I boil those down, what the charter expressly provides for is the styling of the election. So it's a special election. Whom votes, i.e. the voters of the ward, the vacating ward, the length of the term, the remainder of the unexpired term, when the election is to be conducted, so 75 to 90 days out, one election, so as specified, no primary election primary to the vacancy election, what filings the election board shall accept, i.e. party nominations and non-party nominated candidates with petitions, and when the filings should close. So then when you look at that, so we said, what is not explicit in the charter? Well, while the charter requires the election board to accept and process the names of candidates representing the established political parties, which are chosen by the respective city central committees as their chosen respective candidates to stand for election to fill the vacancies. And then also that persons desiring to stand for election as nonpartisan candidates shall file nomination positions. Basically, despite this, the charter does not expressly provide that a ballot designation appear next to the candidate's name on the ballot. Now, I know that's what we're here to talk about, and I think Alderwoman Tyus, you would argue that it does. Just strictly, Alderwoman Tyus. So that's essentially, so then looking at ordinance 7140, which is the Prop D, and as kind of been also talked about as nauseum, I guess we can skip specifically to section 4, where it talks about vacancies. Section 4 says, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the election to fill a vacancy office of mayor, comptroller, president, board of aldermen shall be conducted as a nonpartisan top 2 runoff election. All right. And so that's specifically how the Prop D relates to vacancies and the explicit language of Prop D. And so as noted, ordinance Prop D conflicts with Article 4, Section 5 of the Charter. As already has been discussed, the top two runoff election. Obviously, the charter provides for no election, no primary. And as the state stated, the law says the charter trumps an ordinance when a conflict exists between the two. And then because of this, there can be no primary election. If you skipping down a slide. So then how do you interpret, how do the charter and ordinance work together? And this is a word I've only read in law books before. I've never said it out loud, so I might not say it correctly, but ordinances in the charter are to be read in pari materia, meaning that laws must be interpreted in the light of each other when they have a common purpose or comparable events or items. So basically, the idea here is that the charter and the ordinance both speak to vacancies. And because the charter is not specific, does not specifically say no DRR, and where it's kind of ambiguous at best. So you read the charter in the light of the ordinance. So the ordinance informs in some sense how the charter could be read. So Alderman Tyus, you said before about,
I'm gonna try one more time. It's Alderwoman, and then I'm gonna
that's what I'm trying to say.
pressing and buttoning, and you will be in trouble, okay?
I'm trying to say that if I'm feeling
Okay.
so. Okay. So then also just kind of for information, what is the effect of an initiative petition? So in Article 5, Section 4, people are provided the power to propose ordinances and adopt the same at the poll with the same effect as if it had been adopted by the Board of Aldermen. And then also as Section 2, Article 2, Section 9 points out, the Board of Aldermen have the power, right, by ordinance to provide for and regulate municipal elections. So basically a charter, an initiative petition, an ordinance proposed by initiative petition would have the same effect as if the Board of Aldermen would pass an ordinance regulating an election. And so I guess the question is, does the charter speak to how a special vacancy election is to be conducted? If the charter does, then the charter determines how the election is to be conducted. If the charter does not speak to how the election is to be conducted, then Prop D Ordinance 71410 would provide guidance. And that's simply how we got to where we're at. So then reading them together, it's essentially, my slide cut off again, but in the slides that I sent you, it should be the full thing. But essentially, it's the charter says, basically charter provides January 24th, 2022, the clerk of the Board of Aldermen notified the election board of an aldermanic vacancy in Ward 28. This was more than 100 days prior to a city general election. The Board of Aldermen then, the Board of Elections says the vacancy will be filled through a special election by voters in the 20th ward. The vacancy election will be April 19th, 2022, 85 days from January 24th. The election board will accept and process the name of candidates representing their established political parties. Nonpartisan candidates shall file nomination petitions by at least 300 Ward 28 registered voters, which is 10% of the registered voters who voted in the 2021 mayoral election. The filing deadline will be March 18th, which is 30 days prior to the April 19th. And the election conducted will be a nonpartisan election. So it's simply reading the charter with Prop D and coming to this conclusion. And so that's essentially where we stand today as far as the reasoning behind what the election board did, or that tries to explain our thought process.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so what I want to go to, because been through all this stuff, let's go to what the charter says.
Sure.
Let's go to Article 4, Section 5. Charter mandates it shall be a special election. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Shall be between 75 to 90 days, correct?
Correct.
Shall not be a primary election, correct?
Correct.
So now we get to, I want to know what your definition of partisan election is.
Partisan election would be a party election, I guess, at that point. So partisan. So I think you asked Gary what a nonpartisan was, but a partisan election is a party-specific election, I guess. I don't know. That's not the best definition.
I know I'm putting you on the spot. Okay. I already voted for your raise, so I still like you anyway.
No,
okay?
I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll do my best.
Okay. So I told you already, don't take this personal. This is me leaning in, okay? Okay, what is your definition of a nonpartisan election?
Not partisan, simply that.
So there would be no partisan part of that election.
If it's nonpartisan, is not. There's no. Right. So the election. So the conduct of the election itself. So the election day is nonpartisan.
Okay. So now we went through the charter, the first 2, 3. The fourth thing says the Board of Elections shall accept and process the name of candidates representing the established political parties. Is that partisan when you start to deal with political parties?
It's definitely partisan, yes.
Which are certified by the respective city central committees. Is that partisan?
That's definitely partisan.
As their chosen respective candidates to stand for elections to fulfill the vacancy. Is that partisan?
Not necessarily. It talks about the candidate standing for election. It talks about them choosing the candidate, but it doesn't say standing for election doesn't necessarily mean that's partisan at that point.
So it is your contention that standing for election when you have been chosen by a political party is not partisan.
So I think the choosing and standing are different acts. Or could be interpreted as different acts. Yeah.
I want you to know you are being watched by a whole bunch of people, okay?
No, I understand.
You're telling me that this thing goes through, process the name of the candidates, says mandates that you come through the political parties, mandates that the respective central committees do it, choose as their respective candidates to stand for election. And then you say, but that doesn't mean partisan. Everything else in there is about partisan except for that.
I'm just trying to explain how we got to the
And I'm
position.
not asking about how
Right.
you got. I'm saying, is that your contention?
I can definitely understand as far as the different argument. That's something that, as far as the brainstorming and consideration, is something that,
So let me try again.
right, sure.
Is it your contention that this whole paragraph, in which the next one and the next one are all about partisan politics,
Right.
and not just can, because if they said can, I would be maybe on your side, but it mandates it. And I know who drew this stuff up. I know the people and what their thoughts. And I also know, so let me just go on, that for the last 30 and 40 years, the Board of Elections have also said that's what it means. So your policy and procedures have been that is exactly what it means. It means partisan politics.
Okay.
So now you're telling
I'm
me.
just trying to read the words on the page, that's all.
I
So, like,
understand.
yeah.
Chosen, well, let's try again, as their chosen respective candidates to stand for election.
Okay.
And that was not partisan. Everything else is partisan except for that.
So let's see, partisan. Okay. To stand for election. So I don't mean to be coy, but to just answer a question with a question. So it says, as their chosen candidates to stand for election.
We ought to get to that. I'm just
Right.
saying, I can't tell me. So let me say this again. Is it your contention that that part is nonpartisan?
Standing for election?
Mhm.
So all I'm gonna say is the words on the page say to stand for election.
But it's connected with the rest of the paragraph and sentence.
It definitely occurs in that context, it does.
And the rest of the paragraph and sentence is partisan.
So the part of a established political party selecting a person, so when it says, in the case, the Board of Election Commissioners shall accept and process the names of candidates representing established political parties, which are certified by the respective city central committees of said party as their chosen respective candidates. So what it dictates there specifically is the election board is to accept those people referred to the election board by the political committee to stand
Which
as
is
their candidates.
partisan.
So the reference of the election board by the candidate to the election board is partisan.
Okay, because and then not only is it partisan, it allows for the Republicans, the
Correct.
Democrats, and if we had a Green Party, the Green Party to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What it does not allow for is a nonpartisan candidate to file under these specific incidents. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
No,
so
so wait, so it allows it allows the central committees of the established political parties to refer candidates to us. And those candidates would be the chosen candidates of the party.
they're more than referred, they certified. They don't have a petition. They are certified. I've been through it. I used to be a committee.
Right, no, that's correct. You're correct.
So I actually do know the process really well, okay?
I can't speak with 20 years of experience doing this, that's for sure. So,
Mine is actually 30 years, but okay. Okay, so again, let's make sure we're not confused.
right.
The board shall accept and process the names of candidates representing the established political party, partisan.
Right.
which are certified by the respective central committees of the aforesaid parties, partisan,
Correct.
as their chosen representative candidate to stand for election to fulfill the vacancy. You're telling me that the political parties would then choose a nonpartisan person to represent them? Is that what you're saying that says? I just want to make sure I hear you.
So what I'm saying is that it doesn't specific, so as their chosen candidates.
You better go talk to your English teacher.
I was an English teacher. So they're based, but it says essentially as their, it says we are to accept that, it says the election board is to accept that candidate as the party's chosen candidate.
No. It says that, you better read this again, okay? Because it says, accept the name of the candidates which are representing the established political parties, which are certified by the respective central committees of the aforesaid parties. So the central committees choose their respective candidates to stand for election to fill the vacancy. And you're saying those Democrats and Republicans then choose a nonpartisan. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying they're choosing a candidate to stand for election.
Their candidate, though, not a candidate. It doesn't say, it says their candidate, which is different than a. So
they're choosing their candidate. I agree.
And I've been a committee person here. Pam Boyd has been a committee person here. And our candidate is a Democrat when we are Democratic committee people. It is not a nonpartisan. And I would ask you, and I already asked Gary, in all the time that you've been there, have you ever seen a Democratic or a Republican Party nominate somebody who represented them that was not a Democrat or a Republican nomination?
I'd be really surprised if that was the case.
So when they choose somebody, their respective candidates, that's also partisan because they're choosing their candidate to represent their parties.
So I'm just gonna say, all I'm doing is reading the words that are on the page. I understand the context that you bring to it.
No, there's no context at all. I'm reading, which are certified by the respective city central committees of the aforesaid parties as their chosen respective candidates to stand for election to fill the vacancy. Their chosen respective candidates. What you would have to say is that they chose somebody that was not a partisan Democrat, and that doesn't happen. Because we will go on further to tell you how it happens if you don't get chosen by the respective parties. And we also have on here Annie Rice, who was a committee woman, who who wanted to be chosen, and she didn't. And so then, you know how she got to be run for Board of Aldermen? She had to go out and get a petition to file, even though she was a Democratic committee woman. So they did not choose her.
Mm-hmm.
And you all had that election. Because there's no, if you show me one time that a Democrat or Republican said, we put a nonpartisan candidate, I'll be quiet. But that is stretching the truth, and it is not what it says. It says they choose their candidate to stand for election to fill the vacancy. So I will ask you again, stand for election, what does that mean to you?
Stand for election means to be on the ballot. To stand for election, that means to be on the ballot on election day. Stand for election.
Okay, so you're telling me that the political parties picked a nonpartisan candidate to stand for election.
So all I'm
asking you yes or no. Do you believe?
No.
Do you believe that political parties picked a nonpartisan candidate to stand for election?
No, obviously not. If the committees.
Okay, thank you. That's all. My question, do you believe? Obviously not is of course the answer. And not only is it obviously not, it is also the past practice forever. Okay.
Right. All
right, let's go on to the next thing. That the certification of candidates shall be delivered to the Board of Election Commission by the aforesaid several city central committees. Is that partisan?
Is it partisan? I mean, no, it is. I'm sorry. Yes, it is partisan.
Okay. What I'm trying to reach out to you to make you understand is that 4, 5, and 6 all talk to partisan politics. 6, said board shall receive not less than shall receive the nomination and the certification not less than 30 days before the date of the special election.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, 7 says of the charter that persons desiring to stand for election as nonpartisan candidates shall file a nomination petition signed in the aggregate for each candidate. So if you want to file as a nonpartisan candidate and the Democrats or the Republicans didn't pick me, you can go out and file a petition as a nonpartisan candidate. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if you go over here to Proposition D, it says, no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. You want to know where it says that? Section 5 of Proposition D.
Sure.
Because I'm wondering why you didn't have this in your PowerPoint.
Well, obviously, I mean, if the charter speaks to it, the charter wins. So, you know, as far as what the charter,
I think that they speak to the same thing. the Section D of Proposition 5 and the charter say the same thing. You can't have a no political, you got to have a partisan. That's exactly what it means. You're stretching all around it, but both of them say the same thing. You cannot have a nonpartisan candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So the candidate has to be partisan. How does the candidate become partisan? You put a D or an R or a G or whatever by their name. So again, I want to go back here to Proposition D. No political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. That's what Proposition D, Section 5 says.
Right.
So Proposition D doesn't allow for there to be a candidate nominated by a political party, correct?
that's what Prop D says, but.
Okay,
can I say
no, you
something?
cannot. No, because I'm going to the next. I'm going to connect it all.
All right.
You cannot. I, as a lawyer, hate it when I'm on the stand and people do me like this. So I understand it, okay?
I was gonna say, I used to be a public defender too. We went to the same school.
I know,
So
I
appreciate
hate it. And the judge has to say, Ms. Tyus, answer the questions, okay? So I get in trouble all the time when I'm on the stand because I want to pontificate my answers too, but I'm just not gonna let you do it, okay?
That's fine.
All right, we're gonna do cross here. Okay, so we go back here to charter. Again, so since you want to work Proposition D and the charter together, the charter says these people right here that are getting nominated are partisan. Proposition D said no political party shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. With those two working together, it says, because this is not a nonpartisan office. And I don't know why everything else, you're trying to go all around this, but you don't want to admit that the two say the same thing, that this is a partisan office. And that is why you have to have a partisan election. You are trying to, and now disavow each part of them and saying, well, Proposition D doesn't apply because obviously these are partisan offices. And so therefore you can do this. You can't have it both ways. And so I would like to see thought out opinion how this works, because what you're saying doesn't make any sense. And all the buzz I'm getting from people all over says what you're saying doesn't make any sense, okay? And so that's why I asked, do you have a written opinion? I've asked for one, a formal opinion from our city councilor. I would love to see something that your lawyers say that's formal. And I see Alderman Boyd has his hand up, so I want to stop for a minute and let him ask a question if he has a question.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, because some of this seems to be kind of confusing, and I'm pretty logical in my processing. So I'm going to ask Ben or Gary, it doesn't matter who answer this question. The 28th Ward alderperson who was previously elected was elected as a Democrat. Is that right?
That's my understanding. I wasn't here when it happened, but that's my understanding. It's a Democrat.
Okay, right, because that was 3 years ago or so. And so if that person was elected as a Democrat, then the party would have to pick the nominee for the Democrat to fulfill that legal obligation of a Democratic seat. Would that make sense?
I don't honestly don't know. I mean, I don't think that my understanding is any party can nominate their chosen candidate in the vacancy election. I believe when I first started here in June, there was an open vacancy in Ward 12. I believe there was a Republican and Democrat candidate both put up that election.
That's correct.
But I think it would be the choice of the committee, respective committee, to nominate his or their own candidate.
Right. And so since that office was previously held by a Democrat, it would only make sense that a Democrat, see you shaking your head, but I'm gonna put a tag on this. It would only make sense that a Democrat replace it. Now, since Prop D came up with all this confusion, we now, as of January the 1st, have 14 wards. Am I correct?
January 1st of this year?
Yes, am I correct?
2023.
Well, it's my understanding that there's 14, but we have to serve. See, when you get elected to office, you're entitled to serve that entire term. That's why, knowing that 2023 was going to be a reduction of 14, the odd people last year could only run for 2 years, okay? Because everybody has the right to serve their full term. Now,
but what I want to tell you, Alderman, if you look at the ordinance that went out to the voters for the charter, it specifically says that our change doesn't start to 2023. So we keep 28 until 2023.
Right, but we just went through redistricting, right, Madam Chair?
Right, but our redistricting, because of that, doesn't start to 2023. Because if you go and pull it in the ordinance that to reduce it, it says will not start until 2023.
Then I have some misinformation there.
But because, right, okay, I'll send it to you.
Because where I was going was, if we've just done redistricting of 14 wards, then there's really no 28th ward. So maybe we shouldn't fill the vacancy.
No, it actually says, I went and looked at it and pulled it up, and I'll send you the ordinance itself, which was Phyllis Young. It says 2023.
Right. Now I know when it technically takes place as far as running for that office.
And the wards itself, the changing of the wards. We just had to do redistricting so that it's in place, so that when we get elected, whoever gets elected will hit the ground running.
So what's the effective date of the redistricting map? It wasn't January the 1st. I was told it was January the 1st.
Just of the map, but we don't operate under it until we remain with 28 wards until 2023.
And this is why it gets convoluted. I get that and I understand that. But so going back to the 28th ward, it was a Democratic seat. And so it was a partisan seat. I don't know how we can make it a nonpartisan seat when we're trying to replace a partisan position. Gary, that's where I'm confused. If we should be attempting to replace a Democrat with a Democrat, notwithstanding the fact that people who want to run as an independent can do that, because certainly Annie Rice did that when she didn't get the nomination from the Democratic Party. She ran as an independent, got her signatures, and she was able to prevail. But she was still an independent until she decided to run as a Democrat. So just logically, and I know I'm not a lawyer, I always pretend to be one, but I take no money from anybody, okay? So that's where it just makes no sense to me that this is not a partisan seat to be fulfilled, even though an independent, nonpartisan person has a right to run and potentially win. Otherwise, it's a moot point for the Democratic Party to nominate anybody. I mean, why don't we just not accept the nomination? Because it's a partisan seat. I mean, that's what I hear you saying, Gary. It's a partisan seat. So why don't we just say, hey, Democratic Party, y'all did what y'all did, but it don't mean nothing to us? Because that's really what you're doing. Because you're saying you're going to put them on there as an independent, but yet the party cannot select an independent candidate. To me, that's just logic. So I don't know why we would put them on there as an independent when we're replacing a Democrat. That's where I'm really confused. Gary?
Well, the fact that a Democrat held the seat doesn't necessarily mean it's a Democrat seat. If somebody runs as a nonpartisan independent, and if they're strong enough to gather enough votes, they become the elected aldermanic person,
right,
even though the seat previously was held by a Democrat, maybe it was held by a Democrat for many, many years.
Right, and I just made that point with Alderwoman Rice. But this was a seat held by a Democrat. In that case, the party gets to pick the nominee. So if the party picks the nominee, the party has to pick a nominee to represent the Democratic Party, yes or no?
Sure.
Okay, so if the party certifies a person to represent the Democratic Party, how in the world can the Board of Elections say, I'm not going to accept that because we're going to consider this a nonpartisan election?
Well, for the reasons that we've discussed before, and I think Ben outlined in his, well, I know you're shaking your head no, and you don't agree with that, but that was our analysis, since the charter really doesn't say how names are to appear on the ballot. We would accept the Democrat Party saying that Jeffrey Boyd is our candidate, but then when we try and mesh Proposition D with the charter, Proposition D says to us that it's a nonpartisan election.
Okay, Gary, one of the things some lawyers taught me, it was I watched judges give rulings. There's a such thing called precedence. Am I right?
There is, yeah.
And precedence is kind of like a tradition. Am I right or wrong?
No, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so if we have a precedence that when a seat is vacated by a partisan person, then, and we're accustomed to fulfilling our obligation with the party to put someone on the ballot to represent the party, then why would we deviate from precedence? Even though I understand you're trying to meld the two, I understand that, but why not err on precedence and not this nuance that Proposition D created?
Well, there's no precedent in the sense that we've never had this kind of a situation occur. And while precedent is a good guideline, it's not absolutely binding. The Supreme Court is dealing with questions now that are calling into question case law that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's scary, ain't it?
Well, it is. Yeah.
But this shouldn't be a complicated thing. I mean, it really has turned into something real complicated. I mean, I don't see how the Board of Election could err in any way whatsoever if the nominee from the 28th Ward was a Democrat nominated by the Democratic Party and went on the ballot as a Democrat. I don't see how you could err at all and be in conflict with Proposition D, because this existed before Proposition D.
Well, sure, this charter's been around for many, many years. Now, things
Okay,
change, laws change.
I guess we're just not going to agree, as you know, lawyers often don't. You know, there's always a defendant and there's always the defense, right? And, you know, and
Yes,
there's a plaintiff. You know, so each one has their sides, and so because I'm not legally a lawyer, I'm not going to really do a lot of debating. I'm just trying to be a logical process thinker in this case. And I just err on the side of the chairwoman of the street department. And I know she is a lawyer, and I know you're a lawyer, and I know Ben is a lawyer. But sometimes odd man outwins. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're a good person.
I have nothing further, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd has her hands up.
The question that I have, because it seems like it's conflicting. Per the charter, it says that people can run, and it's stating that they can do their party And the Democratic, Central Democratic Committee, the Republican Committee, and the other committees, they can pick their candidate. But what you all are saying, they can't pick their candidate and put them on the ballot. Is that what you're saying? As their parties?
So I get to Alderman Boyd, this is Ben. So as far as what the candidate, the Central Committee can choose their candidate. What I think we're saying is that the charter on its face is silent as to how the election itself is to be conducted. And because it's silent, Proposition D then informs how the election is to be conducted on election day.
So, okay, so I'm kind of confused because it's saying persons desiring to stand for election as nonpartisan, those people have to get a petition. But it doesn't say the nominee from the Democratic Committee or the Republican Committee has to do a petition. So if I'm going for a Democrat, Sharon's going for a Republican, somebody else is nonpartisan, that nonpartisan has to get the petition, correct?
If they're not going through the Central Committee, that's correct.
But you all are saying this will be a nonpartisan election. That's why I'm confused. So how are you claiming it will be a nonpartisan? So you ignoring the Central Democratic Committee and the Republican Committee on what their nomination is?
No, so like when it says in, I think section, Alderwoman Tyus had it broken down in sections, but in the phrase where it says, in such case, the Board of Election Commissioners shall accept and process the names of candidates representing the established political parties, which are certified by the respective central committees. We're not ignoring the committees, but we're saying the charter specifically says that if the Central Committee of the established political parties nominates or certifies to us a candidate, then we have to process that candidate for the election.
So they don't have to get the petition signed?
That's correct. No petition.
So why are you all making a nonpartisan election then?
Because the charter speaks about the nomination process specifically. It does not speak to the conduct of the election specifically. And if you read the charter and the ordinance in pari materia, each informing each other, then when the ordinance, Prop D, provides for a nonpartisan election, essentially is looking to that.
Okay, it's totally confusing me because it seems like you all are ignoring the charter and you saying that this Prop D overrides the charter. And I was always taught that you can't override the charter. So that maybe I'm looking at it wrong. So, okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just trying to explain our position. Thank you.
Carl? Alderman Vaccaro?
Yeah, okay. I do have a couple questions that are comments. And I would ask Alderwoman Tyus or Gary or someone can maybe answer this. But I agree that the city councilor should not have any say in this. I mean, I agree with that. I think they're not a city office. Plus, I don't know. I just don't think they should. I would say, Gary, why haven't these guys gone to the state? And the other thing I would ask from Alderwoman Tyus is, why don't we have our attorney take this to court and get a legal opinion from a real judge so that we can figure this out? Because I agree, if the Democratic Party is nominating someone, they should have a D behind their name, and the Republican Party the same. And and if we go with the Prop D, then I think the Democratic Party should be able to nominate 700 people. Because of the rank, well, you got the ranked choice thing going on. So maybe we can have them, this way. I think it treats one group unfairly, saying you don't have to get petitions because there's a group of people, even though they're Democrats and some party will pretend it's not. but we're gonna punish you by saying, since that party's not picking you, even though we're saying we're not gonna put a D behind that person's name, I would ask that Gary and Ben, that you would get a legal opinion from the state, not from the city. And I would say, Alderwoman Tyus, maybe we need to have our attorney file something. I'm surprised that the Assembly Democratic Committee hasn't done it, because this is really, you're battling for them. Technically, I think in this case, I should put a D and an R and a G behind the names. I don't see it being the big violation, but I would ask, Gary and Ben, can you please get something from the state? And Alderwoman Tyus, maybe we should have our attorney file something in court, and they can give us a pretty fast answer in court, I believe. And I could be wrong on all these points, so I'm just asking opinions.
So Alderman, I will tell you, in my letter to them, I actually have CC'd both Carla as the chair of the Democratic Central Committee and Michael Butler as the chair of the State Democratic Committee. And I am asking them to file a lawsuit against the Board of Election. And I put that in my letter to them, that if they did not follow the law, that I would be doing this. I also have asked the city councilor, who is our lawyer, not theirs. That's why I was irritated that they bring up Michael Garvin's name, because Michael Garvin does not represent them. And so he's created somewhat of a conflict of interest. I have asked the city councilor, who is not Michael Garvin, to appear before our committee. She didn't. She's going to get a subpoena. So we're going to continue until tomorrow. And so I'm filling out subpoenas because she will come before us. And now that they brought up Michael Garvin as somewhat being their lawyer, and that's why our lawyer has no business over there representing Anheuser-Busch or the Board of Election, because they work for the city of St. Louis and their departments. And the first thing in our charter, it says they represent is not the mayor, it is the Board of Aldermen. And so I am intending to sue them because this is wrong. This is not correct. It is not anything that's hard. It's something they're stretching to do and wrapping us around the Proposition D, when both Proposition D and the charter, this is what they don't want you to hear. Let me say again, both Proposition D and the charter says that a nonpartisan, no political party shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. That is Proposition D. When you go to the charter, it says the only way you can be a nonpartisan person and stand for election, because they keep saying, well, this isn't referring to the elections. It most certainly is. Everything about it is an election. And it goes on to say, the person who desires to stand for election as a nonpartisan candidate shall file nomination petition. It talks about the election the whole time. They're just trying to eradicate that like it doesn't appear. Okay, and that's why they don't have these things in here, because they're trying to pick and choose. You cannot cherry pick. The charter is right there telling you how to do it. Anything you're doing other than that is something where you're trying to allow an ordinance to modify the charter. It cannot. It's a pretty easy argument. And if it was such a good argument that they had, they should, as you said, had a written opinion in which they do not. Okay, so I do intend for us to take this on. This is important to us. I'm not just doing it for the Democratic Central Committee. I'm doing it because Proposition D is poorly written, tricked people. People voted for stuff, had all kind of crazy outcomes. Alderman Bosley got 70-some% of the vote and had to run with the same person again. I got 60-some% had to vote again. Alderwoman Schweitzer blew her opponent away. Those are all horrible consequences because the people who were writing the ordinance didn't know what they were doing, and they wrote poor ordinances. Instead of admitting that, they are now doubling down and coming with Proposition R, which has also got all kind of flaws in it. And so we might as well let people know now, and that we're not going to let that go by and sleep on it anymore. A bunch of us are going to go out and talk about who's doing this and the flaws and the problem that's going on with these things so that they can know. And I feel sorry for the Board of Elections, because the Board of Elections didn't even hardly have time when Proposition D went into effect. We voted for that in November, no time to really go through it. They're then having to run through and do all of this. That is just, it was like an ends justify the means. They wrote that proposition for one person who I in fact supported, but I do not support ends justifying the means. And I do not support writing something for one person and then having it be so sloppily written that it has all these loopholes and things. And so we should go to, as the board, I'm going to ask the board that we go in and sue the Board of Election. And I'm going to ask the city councilor, well, I'm not going to ask anymore because I've told her twice to come here. So she'll get a subpoena to appear before us because we're going to continue this because I want to know what her opinion is. And I want to hear Michael Garvin explain to me why he was over there giving counsel to the Board of Elections, Alderman.
Well,
Alderwoman, it looks.
First off, I would say using the city attorney, I've had this issue before with CREA, the Civil Rights Enforcement. If for some reason I violate your civil rights, you feel I violated them. Now you're an employee, I'm an employee. The same person, the same group that is going to take your case because you said it was unfair, they're also going to be defending me. I mean,
but in this case, it doesn't happen. That's why, Alderman, I want to say in this case, it doesn't happen. That's why I was establishing. The city council.
And I get it, but I would, right. I mean, having them go to court since they've already, if you ask me, are fairly tainted in this.
Well, maybe we get an outside counsel.
I think the Board of Aldermen has the funds in it for something like this. I think we should hire someone and actually get this across the street. And then whatever the judge says, then that's what we do. I understand both sides of this, but I agree that if the Democratic Party is nominating someone, a Republican Party or the Green Party, there should be a D and R or G or whatever the different parties are. What's silly about this too, the Democratic Party is going to
Madam Chair,
yes.
I'm gonna call a point of order, and I want to be respectful. But I know Alderwoman, I don't remember Alderman Vaccaro having his hand up. I know Alderwoman Schweitzer had her hand up, and then I put my hand up again after she did. And I just want to know, are we going to do a free for all, or are we going to kind of go in order that people might raise their hand?
Well, I had my hand up, but I didn't have my picture on.
He did actually have his hand up.
I had my hand up, but I don't always have my picture on.
Wait a minute. Excuse me, Alderman. Okay, he did have his hand up. And then it was Schweitzer. And then, we always put the person who has spoken once before you go back to the second person. So I actually did write down, okay?
Oh, he's on there twice. That's why I'm probably confused.
Okay, yes.
He's on there twice.
Right, all right. And Alderman
Vaccaro was on twice.
Right, okay.
Okay, so that's my confusion.
I'm almost there. I sort of lost my train of thought, but
you can come back if you remember it, if you want.
Well, give me half second. I talked about CREA, I talked about the attorney. I think we should hire somebody, and find out in court, and then eventually we should go back and fix all this mess. But anyway, I'm gonna let it go there. I am on twice because I'm in two different rooms at the same time because I was in two different meetings and one of the meetings dropped off. So I just stayed that way. But anyway, I agree 100% with what you're saying, Alderwoman Tyus. And I think we need to take it to court, but I do think we need an attorney that we hire that represents us, not someone that's already given their opinion. And we're gonna say, go to court and fight against what you just said. Because if I was the other attorney, I would say, well, here's what you already said, so why are you here? So anyway, I'll drop off at that and kind of maybe sign off one computer, and I'm just going to listen.
Okay, Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Tyus and members of the Streets Committee. This is a really interesting conversation, and one of the things that I think is part of our role as alder people and the role of so many people in various city and county departments is interpreting the charter and interpreting ordinances and making the decisions in the with the most information that we can as we move forward. Some of the questions that have sort of stood out to me is that, does the charter say that parties nominate to fill a vacancy? Yes, it seems to. does the charter say that the ballot must show or shall show whether that person who's nominated by that party has a D or an R or whatever behind their name? No, I don't believe the charter says that. If the charter doesn't say that, which I don't think it does, do we then move to ordinances or, this case, an initiative petition that follows the same pathway as an ordinance? I think yes. So I can see how the Board of Elections came to their determination. I'm also hearing that the person who is nominated by the Democratic Central Committee, may plan to sue over this issue as well. And if the Board of Aldermen is having getting a legal opinion, or the Board of Elections is getting a legal opinion, I think that we might find that there are other interpretations of this to go with. So I can definitely see and how the election board came to this decision. And I obviously very much appreciate their time today and coming and explaining it to us. It's very, very helpful. I appreciate Chairwoman Tyus for bringing this up and allowing this discussion. I've certainly learned a lot more about the charter and everything through this. And I really appreciate the time to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Bosley.
All right. I got of course I've been reading the charter since we've been here. From my understanding, and I got a question for a lot of this seems to be more of I'm reading what it says, and I do see there is some sort of an absence in ballot language, and why you would go and look for Prop D to be, I guess, the decider of how to conduct that election, by way of whether to put that party by that candidate's name. I guess my question would be, you are a lawyer. Is it of your opinion that if you were to put that D or R there, or allow a candidate to represent his party, and that was placed on the ballot, would you then, in fact, be breaking the city ordinance? Would you be doing something unlawful if you were to proceed and put those things there and identify the party?
So Brandon, you broke, Alderman Bosley, you broke up a little bit there, but was that question directed to me?
It was. Want me to repeat?
So I think I understand the question, but when you said I'll ask a question to so-and-so, it broke up a little bit. But what I would say is, with our reading of the charter with the ordinance together, if the ordinance would have some bearing on how we interpret how the special vacancy elections to be done, I think it would be unlawful if that is the correct reading.
Okay, so is it in your opinion that that is the correct reading?
Well, I mean,
I just want to make sure that I'm clear that you all would feel that there was some type of a consequence, or you'd be breaking the law knowingly if you move forward with putting, identifying those candidates with their party on the ballot.
So as Alderman Tyus just kind of referred to, I mean, so this has been a question we've been debating for the last couple of weeks. The election is it's the 19th of April, and when it's supposed to be happening, filing wouldn't close to the 30th. So, I would say right now, our position is that we stated in the notice that we provided, this is our position. So that's our belief at this time. So that's all I can really answer to that, if that makes sense or not. Does that answer your question?
It does, and once again, it sounds like an interpretation, something that we can't particularly point to and define and say this is something that says we shall not do. In the ordinance, do you feel like there's something that says you shall not put those candidates, identify their party? Do you feel like there's a section that says you shall not?
It doesn't say it to me.
There's nothing that says that shall not. That's correct.
So in my opinion, or in your opinion, it leaves it open to where it kind of could be up for not only discussion, but up to the Board of Elections' complete interpretation, because it seems to be nothing under the charter that would direct you to do a particular thing.
I
So
think
you
that's
all are
our-
interpreting that ordinance.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I would say that's our.
No, that's okay.
It says essentially that the charter is silent in some sense. The charter isn't clear as far as what its directive are, as far as how the conduct of the election is supposed to be had. Therefore, then you turn to the ordinance, which gives some instruction. And so I think what you said puts it in a nutshell.
Understood. So, and with that ordinance, it doesn't, once again, just like the charter, doesn't completely specify or not specify. It gives that, once again, room for interpretation. What it seems like it's given is some little bit of room for you all to make decisions on how you feel these elections should be conducted based on there not being real concrete verbiage that instructs. Is that
well? I would say in some sense the ordinance is more concrete than what the charter says, but then that's where, in those concrete instances, a lot of it conflicts with what's in the, specifically laid out in the charter. So that's, where those kind of butt against each other. Obviously, the charter would win. It's in those instances where it's not all the way spelled out by what the charter says, where the code might give guidance.
Understood. And I definitely see, once again, that position, and it does speak to the partisan candidates being nominated and us identifying here in the charter with those candidates. And by definition, partisan here, in Missouri state statute, as a partisan political office, any office of which a candidate is nominated or elected as representing a party pursuant to Chapter 115. So, I mean, it definitely is speaking solely to parties and us identifying those parties. So, it kind of seems like you do have the authority to some degree to interpret that and say that we are just going to run with this. And if there's, sorry, I got a call but if we make this decision that it is wrong, we also can go and get an outside legal opinion also. But this is our interpretation of it. And because of this being left up to our interpretation, with it not being solely specified through the charter, and it seems like the charter and the ordinance, once again, is having that bump, will it be safe to say that if most aldermen that, I guess, those who are interested in this conversation, if they agree that they believe that, the election should be ran in a way where, those candidates could be identified, and as the government officials here within the city, we are, willing to back you up on, any ramifications that could, take place. So, we do things like this all the time. We make decisions and say, this is our city and this is the way we kind of want things to go. And if anything happens, that's what we have. We don't have lawyers on retainer. I guess you all don't, but that's why we have protocols and folks set up in different offices to be able to, kind of do damage control. So I think in the event where we were to say this is the way that we think this election could go, we got our city, I also was the opinion of our counselor here, and you all got a kind of some backing. Would you feel more comfortable in moving forward and treating the election the way that, as most of us would agree it should be done?
Okay, so.
And not trying to trump your job at all.
No, I mean, as a couple of you said, this has been an informative discussion. I appreciate always talking to all of the older people. I appreciate talking to Alderwoman Tyus. I know she brings a lot of wealth and experience to any issue. So, as far as comfortability, I don't know if necessarily the opinion of the Board of Aldermen would make us feel more or less comfortable. Essentially, we're just trying to do the job that's in front of us and trying to interpret things in the best way we can and in the best sense we can. Given the fact that, the charter is the charter. The charter is, the controlling document. Plus, that voters voted for Prop D in 2020. So it's like, how do you give expression to all of that? And as far as, in some sense, I will listen to anything and I will process it, and I will for myself always come to a determination what I think's right, what I think's, the better course of action. And obviously, if someone can convince me otherwise, obviously I will always listen to that. But as far as the right course of action, there is a right course of action. We're just trying to find the correct footing.
So that's all I had. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Alderman Boyd.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ooh-wee. So I decided to go back and look at what the voters voted on based on ordinance 69185, which said that we shall reduce ourselves. I'll just read what it says. Until December 31st, 2021, the city shall be divided into 28 wards bounded and numbered as wards of the city, now beginning January 1st, 2022, and thereafter, the city shall be divided into 14 wards. And the boundary shall be based upon the 2020 census, okay? Now, the ordinance that the redistricting ordinance was effective January the 27th of 2022, which was signed off by the mayor. So technically, and based on what the voters voted on, it says beginning January the 1st, 2022, and thereafter, the city shall be divided into 14 wards, which to me means we no longer have a 28th ward. So we don't need to do an election. But then it goes down to talk about how those who were elected would still remain in their positions. I'm just gonna sum it up. So it basically said, you know, if you were odd, when you ran in 2019, you got a 2-year term. And if you odd and when you run in 2023, you get a 2-year term, and the even gets a 4-year term. But so how do you reconcile the fact that the voters voted for the fact that we're gonna have 14 wards effective January the 1st, 2022? We have an ordinance that went into effect January the 27th, 2022, that effectively put us in 14 wards. So I'm going back to what I said earlier, but the chair, you know, corrected me and said that wasn't true. And so, you know, I believe documentation be conversation too. That's why I'm always in a coachable and teachable mode. And so, since Alderwoman Navarro ran and she won for a certain period of time, there was a 28th ward. You know, if she had an opportunity to serve that whole time. But as of January the 1st, basically of 2022, there is no more 28th ward. So how do we reconcile that? I'm opening this up to either the chair, who's a lawyer, Gary Staff, who's a lawyer, Ben, who's a lawyer at the Board of Elections. So how do we reconcile that? When I'm just reading it, what it says in black and white, what the charter amendment was and what the ordinance just did.
Okay, Alderman?
Yes.
I'm gonna pull up and send you the ordinance. Sometimes what they put out is not the full extent of what it was. So I'm gonna send you the actual ordinance, which was approved, and it's a submission ordinance, which was approved July 9th, 2012, okay?
To put it on the ballot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm reading from that ballot. This is the ordinance that came from that November 2012 election, though.
So sometimes they shorten stuff on the ballots. Haven't you ever watched that? They got into it with the Secretary of State.
I know, I got you. But
okay, so I understand.
But I'm reading the ordinance.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me get it for you. You reading the ordinance?
69185.
Okay. 69185. Hold on. Because I went and researched this, and I didn't bring this in front of me because I didn't realize this was going to become a issue. But okay, wait just a minute.
And I'll tell you where I was reading from. Go back up to it. Section 3.
Pulling it up now because there's something in there. Wait a minute.
Well, actually, I see section 3 boards. Actually, it's section 1. I'm sorry. Section 1. Then it says a section 3 wards.
Wait a minute. Okay. Because that's what I thought at first when I first started looking at this too. This is what's happened when you change so many things at one time. And that's why I say about people don't know what connects to what, because, okay.
And while the chair is looking at that, Gary, so I have a question for you. So if technically, no, let me ask you another question. So when will the data come out as far as the precincts and all of that stuff for the newly 14 created wards, which was effective January of 2022? When will we get precinct information?
Well, we still need all of the various district lines. Jefferson City still has not finalized. So until we get all of those, I mean, we know what the wards are. We don't know where those other district lines are going to be. And when we draw our precincts and set up our polling places, we try not to cross district lines in a given precinct, just because it makes things less confusing that way.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, I'm Vice President. If you look in Part C, Section 1, composition.
Part C, section, are you in ordinance 69185?
Yes, and it's page.
Part C, okay.
Yes, I think it's page.
Composition
4 of
up there.
6. You see it?
Okay, letters of violence, every limitation before the first day of land insertion.
So it tells us until the first day of April 2023, we still keep 28.
Okay. So yeah, okay. So that wait a minute.
We've actually done redistricting.
It says 28. Okay. It specifically says 28.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. I'm usually pretty good with this.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarity.
All right. I would have had it marked, and I probably should have, because I should have figured it was going to come up, because that was my first thought too.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm still back
to too many changes going on at once. I'll tell you that.
I agree. All right.
But they did a better job. You know, I'm not a fan of the sponsor of this bill at all, Phyllis Young, but they did a much better job of what they were doing than the people who wrote Proposition D, okay? Because they were legislators, and I'm all for the citizens legislating, but they better give people the right stuff that makes sense, okay?
Got it. All right.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or concerns to the 2 members of the Board of Elections that came? Anybody not on the committee? Anybody on the committee? Because what we're going to do.
I do.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. So
Yes, sir.
Gary, let me ask you this. Based on, what you guys have heard in this hearing, and certainly we were not part of the discussions on the final decision that you guys made, is there any harm, any foul to put a D after the Democratic nominee on the ticket? Will it conflict with the charter? Since I heard Ben say it was silent?
Well, our analysis, we think that Prop D requires a nonpartisan election. Now, I know there's some difference of opinion among the members of these committees, and I'm certainly a respectful admirer of Sharon, of Alderwoman Tyus, and her analyses and her thoroughness. As of right now, I'd say we're planning to continue doing what we're doing unless, I guess, potentially, well, if someone files a suit and a judge says do it differently, we would certainly abide by that.
But Gary, wouldn't it make sense though, even when they put in the language to reduce the Board of Aldermen, they kept to 28. And back then they were partisan elections. And so if we're gonna stay true to the voters, reducing the Board of Aldermen, that we should stay true to the partisan effort or the partisan, what's the word I'm looking for? I just asked you about it not long ago. Lawyers do it all, the precedents, the partisan precedents. Shouldn't we stay loyal to that
Well, I'm not sure there's a precedent beyond the fact that when there's an aldermanic vacancy, even before Prop D, there's a provision for people to run as nonpartisan independent. Now,
Exactly.
so
Absolutely.
potentially,
Guess what? But guess what? They had an I by their name, and the party person had a D by their name, right?
I understand that. I'm just saying that creates the possibility, which has occurred, that someone could run as a nonpartisan independent and win the seat. And probably,
Right, I agree.
I mean, precedents change based on changes in the law, sometimes based on changes of the makeup of a court. And Proposition D changed what had been a precedent of always having partisan municipal elections.
Okay. So basically what you're saying in a nutshell is you're going to disregard what the party wants based on what the party certifying, and you're going to give them a waiver for having to go get signatures, right? Because technically isn't that how it's like you were mixing apples and oranges. Either you're going to accept the certified nomination from the Democratic Party and have a Democrat on the ballot, or you're not. And if you're not, and going back to what Alderman Vaccaro said, so if you're not going to accept the certification, then that person that they nominated should be required to go out and get signatures. You can't have it both ways, Gary.
We're not trying
and I'm
to.
not a lawyer. I just played one on TV, okay?
We're trying to observe the requirements of both the charter and the ordinance.
Okay.
But you're not doing it.
Well, we think
And I
we
will
are.
say further, you shouldn't even do it. The charter and the ordinance you don't need to do it, both of them. This is my point. There is already a process by the charter. The ordinance is out the window as not only pertains to replacing members of the Board of Aldermen, it is also out the window as it pertains to replacing the mayor and the comptroller. And they're trying to mash apples and oranges, as you said. And if you don't look at anything else, the charter specifically says the only way you can stand as a nonpartisan candidate is you file a nomination petition. You cannot go around that, okay? And then Proposition D says, no political party committee shall be allowed to formally nominate a candidate for a nonpartisan office. So since the political parties are nominating, that cannot be a nonpartisan office. All they're saying is a bunch of we think, and no legal opinions, trying to use our city councilor, which is ridiculous. And so that's why I had this, because I wanted people to bring this to their attentions, okay, of what was going on. We have let this kind of thing slip before. And now as senior alderman, Alderman Vaccaro, Boyd, and Tyus, we are not going to let this kind of thing go on without a challenge, is what I'm saying, okay? And if it has to be a lawsuit, so be it. The sooner the better. And I just got a thing from Alderwoman Rice. She says that the Democratic candidate is willing to take it to court also. But I think that both the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the Democratic Central Committee and the Republican Central Committee should be suing the Board of Elections from all things, because they are absolutely trying to mix apples and oranges. And you don't even have to go to the proposition, because it's already a way to replace aldermen. So does anybody else have anything else that they need to say? The charter is specific about how to replace aldermen. So at this time, since our city councilor didn't show up, we will be recessing again. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, we will come back and start our hearings again, and hopefully the city councilor will appear. I am I'm going to talk to our attorney, and I've already talked to our clerk and left a message for our president about subpoenas. I don't like people who don't feel like they have to come before the Board of Aldermen. And so we'll do whatever we have to do to get some answers from our city councilor and those people who, which is interesting to me, the Board of Elections, who they do not represent, they've talked to, but then they don't want to come before us. That's very interesting to me. And so we'll have to do it a different way.
Excuse me, Chairwoman, I'm sorry to interrupt. You said Michael Garvin.
We're gonna, Michael Garvin, city councilor, maybe somebody else too, because there's another name that appeared in this, and I was trying not to bring them in it, but questions will be answered.
I think he's on the attendee side.
Okay, well, right now, but I want the city council to be here with Michael Garvin now. I wasn't even gonna invite Michael Garvin.
Got it.
Because to me, he's already got a conflict when he's over there talking to the Board of Elections. So I want the city councilor, because that's who I was told initially had given them opinion, the city councilor. And she didn't indicate that she had. And so now I want to hear from her. So we will be recessing to 10 o'clock tomorrow.